Welcome back to the History of, where I explain shows or media that my girlfriend has little to no interest in so that my ramblings will make at least a tiny bit of sense. Today's topic is one of the most popular and fashionable anime and manga series of all time, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Spanning 25,000 pages across almost 1,000 chapters, technically having a longer page count than that of One Piece, and separated into arcs called parts, JoJo's is an incredible series to watch and read. I actually cannot recommend it enough. With the highly anticipated anime of Steel Ball Run being recently announced and presumably coming out soon, there's hardly a better time to partake in it if you haven't already. So whether you're completely new or a fan of the franchise, let's get right into the video. Our story begins in 1868 with George Joestar and Dario Brando, who father the most iconic characters of the part and some of the most iconic characters in the series as a whole, Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando respectively. During his infancy, Jonathan gets involved in a high-speed carriage accident, which is kinda crazy when you think about it. A little rain happens and suddenly you end up with a DUI. Anyways, during the incident, Jonathan's mother perishes, and while the rest of them are out of commission, none other than Dario Brando rolls up trying to steal from the presumably dead family. Except, actually, George is not dead and thinks that Dario is here to save his life. Dario winds up in jail later, having been caught selling George Joestar's wife's ring. That was a lot of apostrophes. But George lets him off without pressing charges, instead asking him to become a good man, which Dario listens to really well and actually turns his life around. It's really beautiful, actually. Over the next 12 years, the pair of Jonathan and Dio are raised in drastically different ways, with Jonathan being a very well-intentioned young man set on becoming a gentleman, which is more or less his entire personality, while Dio is raised under the iron fist of his abusive father, who most likely caused the death of his mother. So in turn, Dio poisons his father in secrecy, leading him to inform Dio of the existence of the Joestar family, telling him to take advantage of their debt to their family. And so, as soon as Dario passes away, Dio does exactly that, pulling up to the Joestar household and immediately causing havoc. He makes it clear to the audience from the get-go that he is intent on destroying Jonathan's spirit, while also putting up a facade of being well-groomed. This comes to a head when Dio, after kissing Jonathan's love interest, whose name is Arena, he gets the shit beaten out of him by Jonathan. It's okay though, Dio takes it rather calmly and responds by throwing Jonathan's dog in an incinerator, though Jonathan can't prove it. During their aforementioned fist fight though, a stone mask on their wall reacts after having blood spilt on it. Presumably though, the two of them get along fine enough for the next 7 years as they graduate from being decently fit teenagers to absolute units of sheer muscle mass. When George becomes ill, Jonathan becomes suspicious of Dio because, you know, he's Dio, and discovers a letter from Dario to George, in which he details that he is sick. Jonathan uses that famous JoJo's protagonist intuition and puts two and two together to discover that Dio is poisoning his father to win over the family fortune. After going to a place called Ogre Street, Jonathan beats up a couple of homeless people so hard that he manages to win over the complete respect of one Robert E.O. Speedwagon, a local crook who may or may not come in handy. Elsewhere, Dio tests out the stone mask for funsies, creating our first on-screen vampire, to which he barely survives because the sun is a deadly laser. Jonathan, and Speedwagon, for some reason, return to the family mansion to expose Dio's plot to kill George. Seeing no way out and on the verge of being arrested, Dio goes to kill Jonathan, to which George intervenes, saving his son's life at the cost of his own, only to ask for a shred of empathy towards Dio as he dies. Dio then gets blasted by a line of cops while wearing the stone mask, turning himself into a vampire. In the ensuing battle, the cops get slaughtered and Speedwagon gets incapacitated, and Jonathan sets the mansion ablaze in an attempt to seal Dio away forever, which seemingly works when he is able to impale him on a statue, trapping him inside of the burning building. Jonathan gets blasted outside of the building, and that is hopefully the last we'll ever see of Dio. In the hospital, Jonathan sees Arena for the first time in 7 years, but seems to be chill with him in spite of the whole, you know, Dio being a freak thing. After getting out of the hospital, Jonathan meets Will Antonio Zappelli, who teaches Jonathan about this part's power system, Hamon, or Ripple as it's known in the manga, which is kind of just really bare bones, and you know, it's still cool enough, but it's not nearly as cool as some of the later power systems in their series. Zappelli informs Jonathan that Dio is alive and has set up camp in a nearby village, completing his training by having him defeat a zombified Jack the Ripper without spilling a drop from a wine glass. Yeah, it all happens pretty fast, it's not very in-depth. The gang of Jojo, Speedwagon, and Zappelli get led into a graveyard, where Dio makes his first appearance to Jonathan after surviving that one FNAF fan song. After demonstrating that he can counter Ripple by flash freezing his body, just roll with it, it's a bizarre adventure for a reason, Dio sends out his strongest fodder, Bruford and Tarkus, two disgraced knights turned zombies. Jonathan beats Bruford in a duel despite it taking place underwater, leaving Bruford to give him his pluck out of respect. That's the name of his sword. The gang retreats from Tarkus though, utilizing a Hamon-infused levitating rock, only to end up in an ancient battleground that Tarkus is familiar with, the lair of the two-headed dragon, which leads to a death battle between Jonathan and Tarkus. The two are chained to the roof, and Jonathan almost dies, but Zappelli sacrifices himself, having been prophesied to do such an act many years ago. Zappelli leaves Jonathan with his remaining Ripple, providing Jonathan enough strength to end Tarkus before continuing on their quest. Outside of the complex, the gang meets Tonpetty, Dyer, and Straso, Straiso's the only one here who actually matters, by the way. Upon meeting with Dio for this final battle, Dyer gets fodderized and the rest of the gang gets occupied with zombies. Jonathan and Dio have a one-on-one, and after a back and forth of nuh-uhs, Jonathan eventually beats Dio after setting his fists on fire, removing Dio's flash freezing advantage, punching him and sending him plummeting off of a cliff, with his body presumably being destroyed in the aftermath. After destroying the stone mask, Jonathan decides to get married to Erina 2 weeks later. However, aboard their ship to their honeymoon, Dio shows up once more, having somehow lived through his previous encounter with death. Dio, however, has found a new respect for Jonathan and decides to show it by attempting to steal the fucker's body, which is almost successful when he shoots Jonathan through the throat with lasers, immobilizing him. However, using the last of his ripple, Jonathan sets the ship to explode, hoping to put an end to Dio for good. Though Erina tries to do the romantic thing and die with her husband, Jonathan's like, "Nuh-uh, this is my moment. Go save this random baby." And so she does, sailing away on a coffin meant for Dio, holding the unnamed baby in her arms. Aboard the ship, Dio pleads for his life to Jonathan, which falls on deaf ears as Jonathan has already passed away, surprisingly content, holding his brother in his arms. And surely, that was the last we heard of Dio. You might be wondering at this point if you're not already familiar. That was part 1 of 9 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, and Jojo is dead. How did that happen? Well, allow me to introduce you to the wonderful world of... Check it out, I'm in the house like talking. Likely unbeknownst to Jonathan at the time, Erina had become pregnant from their recent endeavors, leading to the birth of George Joestar II sometime after she was rescued from the ocean. Erina gives the random baby that she rescued, dubbed Elizabeth, to Straiso to raise as his own daughter, who he teaches Ripple and entrusts with the Red Stone of Asia, which will become important later. After they grow up, George and Elizabeth later meet and get married. However, after having a kid, George gets killed by his commanding officer during World War I, who was one of, if not the only, remaining zombie that Dio had created, blending in with humanity for a surprisingly long amount of time. Elizabeth kills the murderer of her husband before giving her kid away to Erina, who decides that it might be best if the grandson assumed his parents died so that he might avoid a tragic situation such as Elizabeth's. Elizabeth ends up going into hiding to avoid the consequences of vengeance, leading us to pick up the story with Jonathan Joestar's very own grandson, Joseph Joestar. Except not really, because we have to catch up with Speedwagon first. After becoming a wealthy businessman, Speedwagon discovers a Mexican pyramid containing several of the fabled stone masks from part 1. Weird, right? Well, even weirder than that, there's a whole ass dude who appears to be made of stone embedded in a pillar. You can make a religion out of this. He informs Straiso of his discovery before Straiso makes his malice known, killing Speedwagon's associates and gravely injuring Speedwagon himself. He then uses the stone mask, enticed by the youth and power that it offers. Okay, now for reals with Joseph. We meet the young man in New York, getting low-key bullied by a pair of police officers after being robbed by a young man named Smokey. He makes quick work of them though, demonstrating a natural affinity for Ripple despite not being trained in the art form. He befriends Smokey alongside his grandmother Erina, who still seems to be doing well for her age. However, they are then informed of Speedwagon's, quote, death shortly after, giving Erina Dio PTSD. Later that day, Joseph is confronted by Straiso, who attempts to kill him, but after what can only be described as some bullshit, in the best way possible by the way, Joseph dispatches of Straiso, who clues him in on the threat in Mexico before offing himself by using Ripple. His final words disturb the young Joseph, who promptly leaves for Mexico. Upon his arrival, he learns from an assassin that those types of German soldiers that I'm probably not allowed to mention on YouTube has taken an interest in the man in the pillar, and as such have taken both the Pillar Man and Speedwagon away for research. Joseph attempts to dress up all pretty for the guards to no avail, so he breaks in the old-fashioned way. In the evil German's lair, they revive the Pillar Man, dubbed Santana, who demonstrates ridiculous feats of strength. Joseph shows up to intervene, and with the help of the leader of the research soldiers, Stroheim, and his, brave sacrifice, Joseph is able to dispatch of Santana in a well, frying him in the light of the sun, much akin to the vampires. Also, while we're at it, series creator Araki shows us a food chain of the JoJo's universe, showing us that the Pillar Men, yes, men, plural, will always be stronger than vampires, who are stronger than humans, which will create absolutely zero issues down the line when it comes to power scaling. Anyways, before Stroheim's death, he informs Joseph that there are multiple Pillar Men, and Joseph then learns even further that he has an ally to meet in Rome, where the Pillar Men are. In Rome, he meets Caesar Zappelli, the grandson of the lamer Zappelli guy from earlier. Two of them butt heads, as Caesar doesn't like Joseph because he blames Jonathan for his grandfather's death, which is like, it's okay though, because I'm sure they'll become buddies. The two of them arrive at the cave where the Pillar Men are supposed to be stored, alongside an, innocent German soldier with a wife and kids who will surely live a long... He is literally already dead. The Pillar Men have already been awakened and make light work of basically everybody. After being squad wiped, one of the Pillar Men, Wamu, goes to thirst him, but Joseph makes a wager with him that if given a month of time to train, he will come back to fight him as an actual worthy opponent. To make sure he holds his end of the bargain, he places a poison ring in a cord on his throat, which will dissolve in a month. Wamu's buddy, AC/DC, also gets in on the wager, though the group leader, Cars, decides against it, being too stoic for something so lighthearted as a battle to the death. The Pillar Men then depart for the part's MacGuffin, the Red Stone of Asia. Who are the Pillarmen, and why do they want the stone? Well, they're an ancient race of super beings who are effectively immortal, and are responsible for inventing the stone masks, though they seek to use the red stone of Asia in tandem with the stone masks to achieve their transition into the perfect beings. They're responsible for having wiped out the majority of Ripple users in their time, but opted to hibernate until the time came for them to claim the stone themselves. Back to our main group though, under the guide of the wise Lisa, who is also Elizabeth, Joseph's mom, unbeknownst to Joseph himself, the two of them train to perfect their Ripple in order to quell the Pillarmen threat on the horizon. The training is brutal, but through the powers of becoming best friends through sheer hatred for each other, they pull through. Lisa informs the pair that Kars is the man who invented the stone masks, meaning that he is indirectly responsible for their respective grandfathers' deaths, because everything somehow always manages to tie back to Dio. But the important takeaway here is that, again, Kars seeks the stone for the sake of becoming the ultimate life form, which is rather convenient, as the stone is in her possession. Near the end of their training, Joseph and Caesar are pitted against their individual trainers, who honestly aren't important enough to name, to prove that they are worthy enough to go against the Pillarmen. However, Joseph's training is interrupted by AC/DC. Though just a short while ago, this matchup would have been very one-sided in favor of the Pillarman, it would appear the scales have tipped in favor of the other side, as Joseph is able to gain the upper hand through some shenanigans with a Ripple-infused web. After losing all of his aura, AC/DC makes one last-ditch attempt to survive by stealing the body of Susie Q, this part's local love interest and a friend of Elizabeth's. But this ends up being largely thwarted by Caesar and Joseph. However, AC/DC was able to send the stone away on a boat, which they learn is headed to Switzerland. Also, Joseph kinda sorta accidentally thirsts over his mom without knowing about the blood relation he shares with her. Oops. In Switzerland, the trio meets with Stroheim, who is a cyborg now. That's pretty cool, but unfortunately he's one of those, so don't get too hyped for him. During the evening, Kars attacks the cabin they're staying in, but is forced to drop the stone by Stroheim. During a scuffle in which the stone slides off of a cliff, Joseph emerges the victor, though Kars permits the humans to hold onto the stone for a little longer. The next day, the group pulls up to the Pillarmen's house, attempting to end things once and for all right here and now, though our main duo gets into a rather heated fight. Caesar leaves with his teacher to infiltrate the hotel, but his teacher quickly gets fragged. Lisa then tells Joseph of Caesar's tragic backstory, involving gang violence and a dead father that he's kinda sorta directly responsible for. Caesar fights Wamu in a one-on-one battle, and gets super close to actually beating him, but is thwarted when a brief slip-up allows Wamu to land a killing blow on him. But Caesar, ever the warrior, rips Wamu's lip ring off, which contains the antidote that Joseph needs for his poison rings, imbuing it in a bubble that contains the last of his Ripple, mirroring his grandfather's heroic sacrifice before succumbing to a piece of rubble himself. Wamu allows the bubble to remain, respecting Caesar's sacrifice, and Lisa and Joseph discover the scene, absolutely devastated in a moment that has unfortunately been memed to death. Joseph vows not to take the antidote until he is able to avenge Caesar, and the pair ends up discovering the Pillarmen holed up in a room. They are outnumbered though, but through a bluff by Lisa, they are able to secure a 1v1 between Joseph and Wamu, and herself and Kars respectively the next day. Wamu and Joseph engage in a chariot battle, which remains rather hard fought on both ends in spite of many a moment where one thought they were the victor, which, in case you haven't noticed yet, is kind of the trend for fights in this series. Even though the fight ends up getting to a point where Wamu gouges out his eyes for an apparent advantage, he still ends up losing. Joseph and Wamu, both sharing in a mutual respect, share a moment where Joseph cures himself of the poison before Wamu ends up fading away. Kars and Lisa go to fight, but Kars is low-key a little bitch and sends his vampires to overwhelm an exhausted Joseph. But it's okay because the Germans showed up. Kinda weird that they're on the side of the good guys here, but like whatever. After Kars knocks out Lisa, Joseph confronts him, though he's taunted by Kars being a little bit of a rage baiter. Though Joseph gets the upper hand on him, and with the help of the Germans, it seems like everything's gonna come to a close, Kars dons a stone mask along with the red stone of Asia that he got from Lisa, transcending to the status of ultimate life form. With his newfound abilities, Kars can transform into any life form on Earth, and is now immune to the sun. Stroheim and Joseph team up to send him sinking into lava in a nearby volcano, but Kars simply emerges unscathed, slicing Joseph's arm clean off. However, as all seems lost, Joseph uses the red stone of Asia in tandem with Kars' own attack to force the lava to erupt, which is all completely intentional by the way. The force of the eruption launches Kars and Joseph into the sky. Rage baiting Kars one last time, he is sent into space, unable to adapt to the void, and thus freezes over. Unable to do anything else, Kars chooses to simply stop thinking. Though it seems like Joseph is going to make a sacrifice play similarly to his grandfather, he ends up pulling up to his own funeral, revealing that while everyone thought he was dead, he simply crash landed elsewhere in Italy. He ended up marrying Susie Q off screen before vacationing in America without telling anyone that he was alive. so funeral. In an epilogue, we learn the fate of many of the part's characters. Lisa did end up telling Joseph of their blood relation before settling down and getting married. Arina passed away in 1950 after a life of teaching. Speedwagon never got married, which might be a reference to his sexuality, take it as you will, and died of a heart attack in 1952. Smokey became the first black mayor in his home city in Georgia, and Stroheim, ever the hero, died during the Germans' retreat from Stalingrad in 1943, and presumably everything was good forever after. Then, in 1983, a coffin was pulled up from the ocean by a group of treasure hunters, with the name Dio engraved in it. The Vampire King himself lives, having stolen the body of Jonathan Joestar for himself, though he doesn't directly get into conflict with the Joestars for a couple of years, instead opting to study and learn of a mysterious form of life energy, which we'll talk about momentarily, raise up a priest from America, and discover what he calls heaven, though the latter two will not be important for a bit. In 1987, we can see an older Joseph being just a bit racist towards people of Japanese descent after his daughter, Holly, married a Japanese man and moved abroad with him. Boards a plane to Japan, mentioning his grandson, who surely we shall never learn of, leading us into the small town of Owase in Japan, where nothing ever happens. But elsewhere in Japan, specifically Tokyo, we get to meet Jotaro Kujo, who is the local badass Sigma type, and who also refuses to leave prison out of the fear of what his evil spirit will do to others. Holly, who Jotaro is kind of a dick to, calls Joseph to see if he can come get him out of prison, and he pulls up with the local Shepherd of Fire, Muhammad Avdal. Joseph gets Avdal to use his stand Magician's Red to teach Jotaro about stands himself, which is probably what you know the series for. Now, for those who are unaware, what is a stand? Well, a stand is a physical manifestation of one's fighting spirit. They come in a variety of ranges, sizes, speeds, and powers, and typically have a unique power each, though some will seem familiar. As a rule of thumb, typically, shorter range stands are a lot more powerful physically, while long range stands are weaker physically, which is a rule that Araki kinda breaks a lot. They are also typically named after songs, though in part 3 they are named after tarot cards or Egyptian gods. Anyways, Avdal gets Jotaro to leave his cell, albeit after almost losing the battle, and Joseph shows off his stand Hermit Purple, which is implied to be a stand acquired by the Master of Ripple, so that's kinda cool. He uses his stand to show Jotaro the man responsible for stealing Jonathan's body, and explains that fate has caused the Joestars to gain stands as a result of Dio acquiring his own stand, stating that this is basically a battle that is fated to happen, though Jotaro doesn't much care for it at the moment. At school the next day though, he is attacked by Noriaki Kakyoin, who is sent by Dio to assassinate the Joestar bloodline, though Jotaro makes rather short work of him. He takes him to the Joestar residence, where they extract a flesh bud responsible for controlling him, which seemingly cures his evil tendencies. The following day though, Holly falls ill, manifesting a stand of her own without the required willpower to surpass the fever that comes with acquiring a stand. She starts dying slowly as a result of her stand, giving the group a roughly 50-day timer to save her life. Jotaro is motivated by his mother's impending doom and determines that Dio is currently in Egypt because of some fly in the picture that Hermit Purple took of him. Kakyoin joins the group, and they depart on a bizarre adventure to stop Dio, with Avdal dubbing Jotaro's stand Star Platinum before they leave. Aboard a plane bound for Egypt, they are ambushed by the stand Tower of Grey, whose whole gimmick is just kinda being fast. Kakyoin dispatches of it rather easily with his stand Hierophant Green, but Tower of Grey had already killed the pilots of the plane, so it just crash lands into the sea near Hong Kong. While eating at a restaurant in Hong Kong, Avdal is challenged to a duel by one Jean-Pierre Polnareff. His silver chariot is simply too fast for Avdal in battle, but Avdal ends up getting the upper hand on him, deciding to spare him, and allowing him to join the party, as he's actually kinda chill. He's on a quest to avenge his sister, as the stand user responsible for her death is likely one that travels with Dio. Aboard a ship bound for Singapore, they defeat a fake ship captain who is using the stand named Dark Blue Moon, after outing him with the use of a light amount of trolling. They take a stowaway girl with them and find themselves adrift on the sea, as their previous ship was rigged with explosives. They stumble upon a massive freighter ship, though it is completely empty aside from an orangutan named Forever, who is not only a complete fucking weirdo, but also a stand user, with the boat, Strength, being a stand with so much energy that it's visible to even non-stand users. After defeating Forever, they arrive in Singapore. While the group rests inside of a hotel, Polnareff is attacked by a man named Devo, who wields the doll stand Ebony Devil. Polnareff low-key almost gets steamrolled as a result of being tied to the bottom of the bed in his hotel, but he ends up winning by breaking a mirror to get a vantage point before killing Devo. Meanwhile, Joseph and Avdal decide to spy on Dio with the TV in their room, but Joseph receives a message that Kakyoin is a traitor, before Dio has an Infinity Ultron moment and blows up the TV. While Jotaro hangs out with Kakyoin, he can tell that something's just a little, off about bro. And this is because Kakyoin is not Kakyoin, but rather Rubber Soul, wielding the shapeshifting stand Yellow Temperance. Star Platinum is unable to damage Yellow Temperance, so he forces the fight to the water, forcing the stand to deactivate to avoid drowning. After destroying Rubber Soul in combat, Jotaro forces him to reveal information about some of the stands they will face, including that the user of the Hanged Man is the one who murdered Polnareff's sister. In India, Polnareff is goaded into a fight with Jay Guile, the user of the Hanged Man, despite Avdol's advice otherwise, forcing him into a gank fight with Guile's partner, Hull Horse, wielding the gun stand Emperor. Avdol tragically makes the sacrifice play, seemingly perishing at the hand of this deadly duo. Kakyoin arrives to aid Polnareff, with the two of them deducing that the Hanged Man allows Jay Guile to travel through the use of light and reflections. Polnareff avenges his sister, disposing of Guile, which is then sensed by Enya, a loyal servant of Dio who is also his mother. Hull Horse escapes with the help of Nina, who joins the group temporarily, afflicting Joseph with the stand Empress, which is this weird nasty boil thing that continuously grows on his arm. He ends up cutting it off though, killing Nina, with the group continuing towards Egypt. On the way to Pakistan, they're rejoined by the Stowaway Girl, and are then ambushed by a man named Zizi and his stand Wheel of Fortune. Despite seemingly just being a strong car, Zizi makes use of it to light Jotaro on fire, but Jotaro abandons his coat, having dug a tunnel to promptly dispose of the stand user. They drop off the Stowaway Girl, arriving in Pakistan. There, they arrive at a town that is just kind of really weird, like some shit almost out of Silent Hill but not quite as abstract. Greeting them is none other than Enya, who pretends to be a hotel owner and lulls them to stay at her hotel. She plots her revenge on the group, utilizing her stand Justice to essentially make people puppets after she creates an open wound on their body. It's a truly terrifying stand, with Enya herself being described as the strongest of Dio's minions, surprisingly, which is kinda crazy, especially when Jotaro defeats it in the absolutely ridiculous fashion of inhaling it really hard. They take Enya captive, intending on getting more information out of her, but she's later assassinated by Steely Dan, who reveals his stand Lovers, which is a part of an archetype of stand that I like to call broke bum-ass stands. It burrows into Joseph's brain, forcing the group to figure out how to get rid of it safely, which somehow concludes with Kakyoin and Polnareff shrinking their stands down, which is really never done again. All the while, Steely Dan forces Jotaro to undergo this bizarre humiliation ritual, which ends as you'd expect. Crossing the desert, they encounter the literal fucking sun, which surprisingly enough is the easiest encounter of their entire journey. At night though, Kakyoin is attacked by the stand Death 13, though he forgets the encounter in the morning. That is until after picking up a baby on their trip, he experiences yet another encounter with it. He is then smart enough to realize that the user is in fact the baby that they picked up. Though he fails to convince the group of the baby's maliciousness, he gets the baby to back off by feeding it something that I'm low-key probably not gonna say. It's just fucking nasty. The group ends up meeting with Avdol's father, though he rightfully doesn't want to see the group. Polnareff, in a famous move known as the Polnareff side quest, wanders alone in a field and summons the stand Judgment, under the guise that it is a real living genie. He ends up wishing for his sister and Avdol to come back to life, and while his sister is a monkey's paw type situation, the real Avdol is in fact here, revealing that he merely faked his death and everyone hid it from Polnareff to avoid him revealing it to an enemy, which is like really fucked up. Like, what is the actual point of that? What advantage does it provide to pretend that one of your party members is dead and not be able to have him help you? Anyways, they defeat Judgment and board a submarine to Egypt, though it is destroyed by the stand High Priestess. In spite of the ridiculous strength against them, Jotaro wins through the powers of punching. I haven't brought it up a lot, but Jotaro just kind of tends to win fights, like any fight that he's involved in, by just punching, or Starfinger in that one case. In the desert, they meet Iggy, a dog stand user who possesses the Fool, a stand that can control sand, and primarily uses it to alter its own form. Though Iggy is bordering on the attitude of a small crust dog, Jotaro forces Iggy to aid him in the defeat of Undul, a blind man whose stand takes the form of water. Kakyoin gets decommissioned for a good chunk of the part as a result of this fight though. The group then faces Oingo and Boingo, who wield Toth, a shapeshifting stand, and Num, a prediction stand, who together plan to kill the Stardust Crusaders, but whose plan backfires in such spectacular fashion that the group literally never notices their presence. Along the Nile, Anubis, a sword stand, possesses a farmer and attempts to make him kill our group. Polnareff battles him, and though Silver Chariot is physically weaker, it is able to win as a result of shooting the tip off of its sword, which is just something that it can do, with Polnareff claiming Anubis for itself, none the wiser. After another encounter where a barber gets cursed by the sword, Polnareff ends up being possessed by it, surprisingly overwhelming Jotaro and Star Platinum before Iggy intervenes and sends it into the Nile. Later, Joseph gets shocked by an electrical outlet inside of a rock and becomes the victim of the stand user Mariah and her stand Bastet, which slowly magnetizes him. Though Joseph and Avdol pursue Mariah, Avdol is under the effects of Bastet as well, leading to absolute cinema. Mariah's plan ends up backfiring on her though when she's crushed by the two. Meanwhile, in yet another Polnareff side plot, Polnareff and Jotaro are turned into babies by this fucking freak Alessi, which isn't too important in spite of how late in the part it happens. when Whole Horse goes to report to a nearly fully recovered Dio, throws some balls and tries to assassinate him, before Dio seemingly teleports behind him, frightening him into taking his chances with the Joestars once more. In Cairo, the group is goaded into a gambling match with Daniel J. Darby, who offers information on Dio if they can beat him. Unbeknownst to them though, Darby is a cheater, and quickly claims many of the group's members' souls as a wager. However, thanks to the absolute genius play of bluffing his ass off, Jotaro beats him in poker in spite of the fact that he's cheating, and returns his friend's souls back to their bodies. Whole Horse returns to fight the group with the help of Boingo, which goes about as well as one would expect. And while the group searches for Dio's mansion, Iggy stumbles upon it by accident, forcing him into a battle with the fierce Pet Shop and his stand Horace. Iggy saves a child and is forced to take refuge in the sewers below. The battle is close, with Iggy even losing a limb, but he overcomes the Ice Wielder and returns to the group with a newfound loyalty for them. Kakyoin reunites with the group, and they enter Dio's mansion with the help of Iggy. At the front door, they are greeted by Talents T. Darby, the previous Darby's older brother, who challenges them to a similar fight, instead involving video games instead of gambling. Though Darby has an upper hand, as he can read people's souls to find out their intents through the use of his stand Adam, Joso retreats with the help of Joseph, granting them access to the mansion. One of Dio's minions, Vanilla Ice, informs Dio of the group's status, and Dio orders him to offer his blood to him, which he gladly obliges. Dio resurrects him though, and sends him after the group. Vanilla Ice ambushes the group, killing Abdul in an instant as he sacrifices himself to save Polnareff. Like, for real this time. His stand, Cream's power, is essentially infinite, allowing him to remain invincible and attack freely from another world, only occasionally needing to peek to adjust his tactics. And this proves to be too much for Iggy and Polnareff, as the two of them are forced into a death spiral. In a moment of newfound bravery for the dog though, he sacrifices himself to save Polnareff. In the wake of the poor mutt's death, Polnareff goads Vanilla Ice into the sun, ending him, as Dio resurrecting him turned him into a vampire. With an additional 2 members of the party dead, the final threat is Dio himself, who I've neglected to point out at this point, but is no longer called Dio Brando, but is instead just called Dio, all caps, you know? It's interesting. While Suzy Q arrives in Tokyo to comfort Holly, the group finally faces off against Dio, who reveals his stand, the world. The group flees into the sunlight, only to see that nighttime is soon upon them. Kakyoin and Joseph end up in a car chase with Dio, where the world proves itself as incredibly powerful even in such a short amount of time. Atop the rooftops in Cairo, Kakyoin tries to set an unbeatable trap for Dio, which is dismantled all at once when Dio reveals the ability of the world, to stop time for 5 seconds, undoing Kakyoin's trap and impaling him. With his final moments, he thinks of his parents and sends Joseph a message, understanding the nature of Dio's the world. He shoots a clock within view of Joseph before perishing, allowing Joseph to figure out his ability. Joseph warns Jotaro of Dio's ability before Dio stabs Joseph, forcing him unconscious, stopping time with that famous sound effect. Star Platinum and the world clash, and though Dio stops time, it appears that even unconsciously, Star Platinum can move during stopped time. Dio attempts to see how far Star Platinum's abilities go, but seemingly figures out that it was a bluff. He stabs Jotaro with a barrage of knives, forcing him to play dead, even having to manually stop his heart to maintain his facade. Just as all seems lost, Polnareff intervenes, if only briefly, before being decommissioned. When Dio goes to ensure Jotaro's death, Star Platinum nearly crushes his head, forcing him to flee, allowing him to drain the blood from Joseph and synchronize fully with his body. Dio appears nearly unstoppable, stunting on Jotaro in such a fashion that he even brings a road roller to crush him with. However, as Dio thinks that his capacity to stop time has increased, it was actually Jotaro learning of Star Platinum's full capabilities under pressure, countering Dio with his own stopped time. Some may call it an ass pull, and maybe it should have been foreshadowed just a little bit more, but through Dio's connection to the Joestar bloodline, the world and Star Platinum share the same ability to stop time, which is kinda awesome if you ask me. Jotaro defeats Dio at last, returning Joseph's blood to his own body and reviving them, before they expose Dio's body to the sun, disintegrating him and surely ridding us of his presence for good. Later, Jotaro, Joseph, and Polnareff bid each other farewell, with Holly reawakening back in Japan in time for her family's return. And all remained well with this family for the rest of time. Wait, what's that? Huh? Joseph did fucking what? Yeah, so even before the events of Stardust Crusaders, Joseph Joestar, rather out of character in my opinion, cheated on his wife with one Tomoko Higashikata, a woman with quite an age gap to the silver fox that is Joseph, resulting in the birth of Josuke Higashikata, who, after a near-death experience in a snowstorm involving a fever and a pompadour man, develops his very own stand, Crazy Diamond. Now, fast forward to 1999, and Jotaro arrives in the sleepy town of Morio, Japan, to tell Josuke that he's on the inheritance as a result of Joseph's affair. And furthermore, that something dangerous is brewing in town. Along with informing him of what stands are, he tells him of a dangerous stand user, Angelo Katagiri, who wields the stand Aqua Necklace, And wouldn't you know it, Josuke later happens to foil a robbery that he's involved in later that day. Angelo then decides to plot revenge on Josuke, and after being caught in Josuke's house, Angelo kills Josuke's grandpa. Tragic. His stand, Crazy Diamond, has the ability to fix things for people, but can't bring people back to life, nor heal Josuke. So this particular situation kinda sucks. And after a fight when Jotaro arrives, Josuke ends up fusing Angelo to a rock seemingly for eternity. Honestly, kind of a valid crash out. However, he learns from Angelo that he acquired his stand from a mysterious bow and arrow, so it's time to check this out. Josuke and a local short boy, Koichi Hirase, visit an abandoned house in Morio, only for Koichi to get struck by an arrow and kidnapped. Josuke meets the Nijimura brothers, Okuyasu and Keicho, the wielders of the Hand and Bad Company respectively. Bad Company is a part of a new type of stands called colony stands, where instead of one big representation of a person's spirit, you get a bunch of smaller ones. Though Josuke gets injured, he makes light work of the brothers, even earning a bit of rapport with Okuyasu. Koichi gets healed during the fight, being able to see stands now, but when he tries to bring out his own, it's just an egg. Elsewhere, Jotaro meets Josuke's mom, which goes about as well as you'd expect, and we get to learn that the bow and arrow was originally owned by Enya the Hag, but went missing following her death. Though it's worth noting that this bow and arrow is what gave Dio his stand, and Jotaro is now here to prevent anything too crazy from going on here with new stand users being created. Back in the Nijimura household, we learned that they were attempting to create new stand users capable of killing their father, as he had been irreparably transformed by one of the flesh buds that Dio had used, though Josuke convinces Okuyasu that they should instead look for a cure. Though they attempt to secure the arrow and get out of there, an electrical stand, Red Hot Chili Pepper, arrives and steals Keicho, killing him, before claiming the bow and arrow for himself. Having found new resolve to avenge his brother, Okuyasu joins the party. Later, Koichi gets extorted by this loser Kobayashi with the use of his stand, the Lock, which is basically just guilt-tripping the stand. Koichi overcomes the situation by unlocking his stand Echoes, forcing Kobayashi to surrender. Hazamada, a fellow classmate of Josuke's, plans to steal Josuke's appearance through his stand Surface, planning to use it to kill Jotaro, which doesn't work because, you know, it's Jotaro. Another couple of days pass, and this crazy lady, Yukako, professes her love to Koichi, and though Koichi initially thinks it's kinda nice, she's actually high-key crazy, and kidnaps him with the use of her stand Love Deluxe, forcing him to evolve his stand into Echoes Act 2. Act stands are also a new thing during this part, reserved for characters who show particularly distinct character growth. However, Araki deemed there's only 2 characters that have such character growth, so we don't really get to see a whole lot of them, unfortunately. I kinda low-key wish he used act stands more, but ah well. Koichi and Yukako part after Koichi saves her life. Josuke and Okuyasu eat Italian food. Nope, not kidding you. They discover this kick-ass Italian place that cures you of ailments courtesy of the restaurant owner, Tonio, and his stand Pearl Jam. Though the gang finds it suspicious because of the violent manner with which it cures people, everything ends up being chill. And would you believe me when I say this is unironically one of the best episodes of JoJo's? It's actually kind of really good. Red Hot Chili Pepper finally appears after a while of doing nothing and tries to jump Josuke, but fucks off promptly once it realizes that it's kinda too weak for this fight at the moment. Jotaro assembles the YBA gang in the middle of a field, hoping to avoid leaking information about Joseph Joestar, as he is set to arrive into Morio shortly, wanting to use Hermit Purple to locate Chili Pepper's user. But, of course, the very man they were hoping to avoid is listening, so he tries to run to catch Joseph at the local docks. Okuyasu makes a valiant attempt to catch it, but proves unsuccessful, and almost dies in the process, so the gang splits up to ensure a safe arrival for Joseph. Josuke and Koichi confront Chili Pepper's user at the docks, one Akira Atoishi, with Josuke overwhelming him in combat in spite of his dramatic musical flair. Akira flees to the boat Joseph is on, but gets quickly decommissioned and imprisoned. Josuke and Joseph finally meet. And then they discover an invisible baby, which results in Josuke losing his life savings. Yeah, kinda awkward. But the baby stays with Joseph, as the mother is seemingly missing and, well, as will be implied shortly, has more than likely met a rather unfortunate fate, as something odd still seems to be going on in Morio in spite of Akira's arrest. Josuke and Joseph, though, learn to get along okay after taking care of the baby. Koichi and Hazamada, the loser guy with the bum stand, meet the self-insert Rohan Kishibe, a talented manga artist who utilizes his stand, Heaven's Door, to peer into people's lives as content for his manga. He does exactly this with Koichi and Hazamada, forcing them to come back continuously for more content while draining their life simultaneously, before Josuke discovers this scheme and wins against Rohan through sheer aura and rage alone. Later, Jotaro enlists Josuke in hunting down a rat that Akira had shot with the bow and arrow. They find the rat and kill it after it has melted a family. However, there is yet another rat named Bug Eaten, wielding the stand Rat, yes, creative, that effectively turns it into an insane sniper. Also, Bug Eaten figures out how time stop works in like 2 uses of time stop. And just another friendly reminder that Kakyoin literally died to figure out that exact same thing, but whatever. Rohan and Koichi team up to investigate a haunted alleyway in Morio that has a bunch of rules involved if you want to not get dragged to hell by it. In said alley, they meet Reimi Sugimoto, a teenage girl who was murdered over a decade prior and has since been forced to remain in that alley, watching each of the killer's victims ascend to heaven. She tasks the boys with bringing her killer to justice, and elsewhere, we are introduced to a man named Yoshikage Kira, who is currently on a date with the severed hand. It seems like we have our culprit. Elsewhere, Josuke and Okuyasu's broke asses meet Shigechi, the wielder of the colony stand Harvest, and team up to try and make some money. They go through some shenanigans and beat the shit out of the kid after he gets greedy, but you know, all's well that ends well. Just a couple of days later, Yoshikage Kira tries to enjoy a picnic date with his hand girlfriend thing, when Shigechi's greedy ass accidentally steals a sandwich bag containing said hand, presuming that it's his own sandwich. Kira tries to take the easy way to retrieve the hand, which almost gets him caught, but after he tries to reclaim said hand, Shigechi accidentally tears the bag, revealing his dirty little secret. Left with no other choice, Kira delivers one of the most famous monologues in all of anime and manga before showing off his stand, Killer Queen, with the ability to turn anything into a bomb after touching it. Though Shigechi makes a valiant effort given the card that he is dealt, he ends up only leaving a clue as to what happened to Josuke in the form of a button that came off of Kira's suit. The stand users end up having a town hall meeting, as such an incident is quite big news. You really get the feel that this small town is shaken by the loss of a child. Thus, our gang takes on the goal of finding the mysterious killer. Alright, you cool with that? Alright, back to slice of life shenanigans. Yukako is still in love with Koichi, so she seeks the help of Aya, a beautician who wields the stand Cinderella, capable of making women more attractive. I know that sounds weird. It's not as bad as I phrased it. Though this seemingly works at first, with Koichi taking a new interest in her, she forgets to obey the stand's rules and ends up becoming, well, ugly. Reconvening in Aya's salon, Koichi helps Yukako get her face back after making a romantic declaration. So the two are kind of a couple now, I guess. Investigating Shigechi's murder, Jotaro and Koichi pop into a shoe shop and learn of his identity from the tailor before Kira, who is lurking nearby, kills said tailor with the use of a substand called Sheer Heart Attack, an automatic heat-seeking bomb that is nearly indestructible. Substands aren't super prevalent, but are pretty cool in my opinion. Kira sneaks away, leaving the pair to deal with Sheer Heart Attack, and though they discover its weakness, Jotaro gets knocked out while protecting Koichi from an explosion. Koichi is then forced to evolve his stand once more into its final form, Echo's Act 3, which incapacitates Sheer Heart Attack through the weight of its words, humiliating the ordinary Yoshikage Kira in public. Kira makes his way back to the shop, to which he absolutely crushes the boy in combat. Because, you know, duh. But in a moment of weakness, Jotaro pulls up and absolutely beats the shit out of him, all while being hole punched before fainting once more. Josuke and Okuyasu pull up, and though they almost get tricked by Kira, the jig is up. Kira cuts off his hand and flees. Pursuing him, the gang tracks him to Aya's salon, where they learn that Kira has altered his facial features to assume the identity of a random man, with Kira blowing Aya up before she can sell him out. The gang investigates Kira's house for clues and discover the ghost of his father, who is trapped in a photograph because of his own stand. Kira's father ends up escaping though, vowing to create more stand users to protect his son with the use of his own stand arrow. Elsewhere, we get to see a glimpse of Kira's new life as he adopts the identity of Kosaku Kawajiri, and attempts to lie low for the meanwhile, though the guy's wife catches on that her dickhead husband isn't really that much of a dickhead anymore. One of the stand users that his father creates is Ken Oyanagi, who challenges Rohan to a game of rock, paper, scissors in order to steal his stand, but Rohan doesn't lose cause duh. All the while, Kira is struggling to adapt to the normality of his new life, as his son, Hayato, grows suspicious of him and his murderous intentions. Josuke meets a man who may or may not be an alien named Mikitaka, but who definitely is a shapeshifter. So Josuke enlists his help in pranking Rohan, which, long story short, ends up in the latter's house burning down after a game of dice. Yeah. Later, Rohan meets up with Josuke, trying to confront him about their game, but notices a secret wall inside of a highway tunnel that appears to show the murder of a woman. Rohan goes to investigate the tunnel, but is trapped by the stand Highway Star, which absorbs his nutrients. Pause. Josuke saves Rohan and tries to find the stand user, all while he is pursued by a ridiculously fast tracking stand. And after a little help from Koichi, he finds the user and beats the shit out of him while he's hospitalized. Oh, and here's this.
If my nose is correct, one of you beauties is on your period. I'm right, aren't I? Who is it? It's me.
Kira's new wife, Shinobu, accidentally kills a cat named Tama, but Kira discovers that the cat has reincarnated as a plant, which attacks his wife. There's this cool bit where Kira is confused that he's able to care for a woman, beyond, you know, the nature of his murders. And after protecting his wife, he ends up keeping the plant dubbed Stray Cats as a tool that may be used later. Josuke, Okuyasu, and Mikitaka meet with Toyohiro, a man who is living aboard a transmission tower. The gang takes turns getting lured into the tower, which forces whoever goes into it to remain there, and returns all damage done to it. They get Toyohiro to reveal that Koichi has been attacked by one of Kira's father's assassins. Josuke and Yuya, the period guy from earlier, work together to track down the user responsible for attacking Koichi, revealed to be Miyamoto, the user of the stand Enigma. He is able to trap things and people in paper, and successfully traps Josuke, though he is saved by Yuya. Josuke fuses Miyamoto to a book and frees Koichi and his mother. Elsewhere, Kira's urges become too much for him to handle, as he finally snaps and kills a couple in their apartment after they make fun of his nail clippers. Which, like, dude, look at these freaking nail clippers, they're awesome. However, his, quote, son, Hayato, witnessed it, which Kira notices. So Kira confronts him and accidentally kills him in anger. Rohan gets his back blown out by Cheap Trick, but to avoid dying, he has the Ghost Alley send it to hell. Which, by the way, Rohan specifies that Cheap Trick goes to hell. It's kind of funny. Anyways, this is basically just to remind you that the Ghost Alley exists. Back to Kira, he is in utter despair, having essentially blown his cover in the most spectacular of fashion. While in anguish though, he gets pierced by the arrow once more, courtesy of his father's presence. And this turns out to be a good thing in spite of it working its way through his neck, as it grants Kira the new ability, Bites the Dust, as well as a new haircut. Bites the Dust forces Hayato into a time loop, in which if he tells anybody about Kira's identity, they will be blown up before his eyes and restart the morning. And this works in spectacular fashion, with basically everybody important in the group dying one way or another. However, the only way to counter this ability is to have Kira reveal his identity himself, so Hayato plots to do so, stealing stray cats to use against his father. But Kira plans on making the main gang's death permanent. Hayato's plan almost works, but because Kira is the main villain after all, he survives. But in the process, he reveals his name to the gang, forcing him to call back Bites the Dust to defend himself. Josuke and Okuyasu come to Hayato's aid, but Josuke almost dies in the process. Kira wields stray cats for himself, stuffing it inside of Killer Queen by the way, turning its air bubbles into projectile bombs. And though the gang hides from Kira, his tracking skills prove very effective, as Kira's dad is giving him insider information. Josuke discovers this and tricks Kira into killing his own dad with one of the air bubbles. He then reveals Kira's location with a piece of glass and confronts him outside. Though Crazy Diamond is physically stronger, Kira gains the upper hand through the use of Stray Cat's bubbles, but it's okay, cause Okuyasu saves the day after recovering from his wounds. Kira is surrounded and tries to hold a nurse hostage to continue his scheming further, giving a rather, unfortunate insight into his hand stuff.
It gave me a rock hard
Kira fails to activate Bites the Dust though and finds himself in the Ghost Alley, and though he tries to fight his way out of it, Reimi Sugimoto, the lady that he had murdered all those years ago, finds peace watching her killer finally get dragged away by the very hands he was fiending over. What happened to Kira in the moment though was that, in reality though with the gang, while Kira thought he was activating Bites the Dust, Jotaro was able to stop time fast enough in a buzzer beater moment, sending him flying. And through a sheer accident, he ends up having his head being twisted off by the wheel of an ambulance. Aw. Oh, and editor me here, I forgot. Reimi Sugimoto was Rohan's babysitter. I kind of forgot to mention that when I introduced her. Reimi bids everyone farewell and ascends to heaven, which is a canonical thing in JoJo's, by the way. Josuke watches Jotaro and Joseph depart, having earned the trust to keep Morio safe in their absence. Joseph adopts the invisible baby from earlier, which I'm sure won't cause any issues with the wife, and Josuke steals his money back as payback. The Kawajiri household feels ever emptier after the disappearance of the real Kosaku Kawajiri becomes apparent. Jotaro earns his doctorate in marine biology. Okuyasu's dad doesn't get cured, but he does adopt stray cats, so it's kinda chill. The young lovers Yukako and Koichi remain in love, and overall, as the next summer passes, it's exactly what Morio needs, an uneventful summer. How do we even continue from here? Well, 2 years later, we learn the tale of Giorno Giovanna and his dream. In 2001, after being taught Italian by Rohan Kishibe, Koichi arrives in Naples, Italy, to investigate a young boy named Haruno Shuobana. It's kind of a hard name to pronounce, who is actually not named that anymore, nor does he have black hair like he did in the picture. Instead, we have Giorno Giovanna, a 15-year-old Japanese-Italian stand user who, after witnessing the cycle of gang violence and abuse as a kid, has made a resolve to change the way that the mafia works from the inside out. Oh, and he's Dio's kid, which is more like a fun fact than a real character-defining thing, honestly. Giorno steals Koichi's shit at the airport, courtesy of his life-granting stand, Golden Experience. As luck would have it for Giorno, a gang member, one Leaky Eye Luca, attempts to get a little bit of money out of him, but after pushing his luck too far, he gets killed by having his own attack reflected back onto him in the form of a frog, which Giorno never uses again, by the way. Luca was apparently a prominent figure in the mafia though, as one of the higher-ranking members, Bruno Bucciarati, comes to investigate Giorno shortly thereafter. He accosts him with his sticky fingers, a stand that allows him to put zippers on anything, but is actually one of the more creatively utilized stands that we see in the series. After engaging in combat, Giorno establishes a little bit of street cred with Bruno, both sharing in their displeasement with the mafia, Passione's ways of peddling drugs to kids, among others. Bruno allows Giorno into Passione with the goal of changing things, but first to get let in, he has to meet with Polpo, one of the capos of the organization. Polpo tasks him with keeping a lighter on for 24 hours straight and returning it to him in prison in order to be accepted into the organization. But you know, shit happens, and a happy accident from an innocent passerby results in Giorno failing his task. and said passerby dying as a result of Pulpo's stand, Black Sabbath, which wields a stand arrow. You see, Passion is an organization seemingly comprised of almost entirely stand users, and Pulpo's goal here is to thin out the competition, either by killing people who are unworthy of a stand or recruiting stand users into the group, as if you don't meet the conditions of becoming a stand user, you perish. Which I can't recall correctly if that was established just here in part 4, but you know. Giorno, with the help of Koichi, who was simply trying to get his passport back, defeats Black Sabbath, and upon returning with the lighter lit, makes Pulpo give him entrance to the organization. He shortly thereafter enjoys a nice banana from Giorno and lives a nice oh my god. Bucciarati introduces Giorno to our main ensemble for the season, including, but not limited to, Fugo and his stand Purple Haze, a poison stand that he cannot control, Abakio and his stand Moody Blues, with the ability to replay events from the past, Misa and his Sex Pistols, colony stand that strengthens abilities involving guns, and Narancia with his remote-controlled airplane stand, Aerosmith. They try to make him drink some piss to embarrass him, but through some stand shenanigans, he actually ends up impressing them by swallowing it whole. Bruno informs Giorno that in order to take down the boss, the gangsters will all need higher ranking positions in Passion. As word of Pulpo's death spreads throughout the Mafia, whispers start to spread of his fortune, and being his closest associate, Bruno knows exactly where this fortune is, so they set out by boat to get it. But along the way, they are targeted by Mario Zucchero, utilizing his stand Soft Machine to not only hide a boat that they're using on top of a separate boat, but also to quickly deflate all of the crew of the boat, save for Bruno and Abakio, who work together to take him down. After a torture session, they learn that he is from a separate branch of Passion, and that he is radioed ahead for help, leading them to encounter Soleil, who gets an upper hand on Giorno and Misa with his stand Craftwork, but shortly afterwards succumbs to the gangsters. After dealing with the threats, they collect the fortune from a public bathroom and receive orders from Passion's boss through a man named Pericolo, protect his daughter, Trish Una, from fellow members of Passion. Trish's mother had inquired into the boss's fake identity just a few days prior and, as such, was killed, resulting in kidnapping attempts on Trish's life to lure out the boss. And as you likely already know, the people who will be pursuing Trish are all stand users. While bringing back groceries for Trish, Narancia is attacked by the stand user Formaggio, who shrinks him with his stand, Little Feet. Awesome name, pal. Through a mix of his stand and a street fire, Narancia defeats him, but not before we learn that the assassination branch of Passion had defected from the group, and are the very traitors that the boss is searching for. They tried investigating the boss's identity, only for some of their members to get put through a metaphorical meat grinder and end up right back on the branch's doorstep. The gang receives orders to retrieve a key that will grant them safe passage, and upon investigating, Eluso, a member of the traitorous assassins, attacks the pair of Fugo and Giorno, with them being separated from their stands in a mirror world with the stand Man in the Mirror. Giorno receives the key from Abakio, and Eluso attacks Giorno, only to discover that he has brought Fugo's Purple Haze virus in with him. When Eluso attempts to escape, he is killed by Purple Haze itself. Giorno cures himself of the disease through an actually clever trick involving creating a snake that is raised in Purple Haze's virus, so that it'll be able to give him an antidote. It's pretty cool. The group is instructed to head back to Venice by train, and discovers that the key they were looking for fits perfectly into the back of this turtle named Coco Jumbo, whose stand, Mr. President, creates a little pocket room for one to hide and relax in. The gang enters the turtle on the train, and quickly discover that they are aging rapidly. Two of the assassination branch's members are here, Pesci and Prosciutto, wielding Beach Boy and the Grateful Dead respectively. The latter is causing everybody on the train to rapidly age and die, lest they find a cold object to slow it, while the former is to bring the group within lethal combat range. Misa leaves to fight Pesci, and almost dies when Prosciutto ambushes him, disguised as a passenger of the train, but survives thanks to his pistols. Bucciarati gets a warning and takes the opportunity to engage the assailants, taking Prosciutto out of the train before engaging Pesci. Pesci finds new resolve since Prosciutto is barely holding on enough to maintain the Grateful Dead's lethality, but the both of them quickly lose to Bruno after the train is forced to stop. However, the duo wasn't without a backup plan, and called for their fellow assassin Melon, who creates a clone of Bucciarati by doing unspeakable things with his stand Babyface, which then creates a secondary stand that takes the form of Bruno. Babyface is able to quickly dispatch of Trish and Bucciarati, but is stopped by Giorno, who realizes his true potential to be a knockoff Crazy Diamond, and recreate organs to heal his party members with. Melon dies when Giorno turns a piece of Babyface into a snake that bites him. After escaping the situation, they learn of a disc they must retrieve in Venice in order to continue their mission, from their now dearly departed Pericolo. On the way there, they are jumped by Ghiaccio, whose stand, White Album, proves a ridiculous threat, freezing things to lethal levels. It would be really cool if his user wasn't such a fucking chud. It is a cool stand though, being one of the first that is a wearable one rather than taking on a traditional humanoid or object appearance. The gang gets driven into the sea, but Misa discovers the Achilles heel of White Album, a small breathing hole in the back of the neck. Misa almost defeats him, but then Ghiaccio develops a new technique, which freezes the air around him to create a reflective shield for bullets. Misa corners him onto a lamppost, and Giorno finishes the job by kicking his neck further onto said lamppost. Good shit. He then heals Misa in a rather interesting manner, and the gang receives their final orders from the boss. They are to deliver Trish to him on an island. Bruno takes her alone, as per the boss's orders. And as Trish expresses her fears at meeting her estranged father, Bruno comforts her, but that is when, holy awesome. Though Bruno had spoke to Giorno of betraying the boss during this past week, this sent him over the edge into fully betraying the boss. He tracks him down to the basement, and during the ensuing fight, something's wrong. Though Giorno tries to call and warn him, he is now in the court of the Crimson King, and the boss's stand, King Crimson, with the power of time erasure, overwhelms Bruno, dealing a fatal blow to him. The gang pulls up to help Bruno, with the boss escaping to preserve his hidden identity. Giorno heals Bruno, though it's weird. It kinda takes him a second to wake up. After waking up, Bruno tells the gang what has transpired, forcing them to make the choice to stay with the group knowing that he betrayed the boss, or to leave and try and keep their current lives. Most of the gang opts to remain with Bruno, though Fugo does not, and leaves. There's a novel that seemingly completes his story, but it's widely considered non-canon, so do with that information as you please. The group is now set on taking down the boss directly, but Giorno notices that Bruno is unreactive to pain and feels cold to the touch. The gang remains in Venice for now, debating how to take down the boss, when they are attacked by the odd sweethearts Tiziano and Squalo, who ambush them, forcing Narancia to lie with the stand talking head, while Clash attacks from sources of water. These two were sent by a separate group of assassins that the boss actually trusts, meaning that there is yet another large threat on the group's head. After some shenanigans, Giorno and Narancia take care of the pair of assassins, and decide to leave Venice. At the airport, they almost get jumped by Carne, another of the boss's assassins, but Misa just puts them 6 feet under. That is, until aboard the plane, they are jumped by the post-mortem stand Notorious B.I.G. It's a powerful tracking stand, and in the confined spaces of the planes, it actually proves to be a real threat. But Trish ends up awakening her own stand, Spice Girl, which will basically only be used in this fight and like one other time ever. B.I.G. is dropped into the sea and becomes this mysterious phenomenon in the ocean, but it's not the main group's problem anymore, so who cares? The group is headed to Sardinia to use Moody Blues to reveal the boss's face, but the boss learns of this information and heads there himself. Depending on the format you're viewing the series, this may or may not be where you get a bit of backstory on the boss. He was born in 1967 in an all-female prison, with the mother claiming that the father was dead and that she had been pregnant for 2 years. The boy lived a mostly normal and timid lifestyle, being raised with the priest instead of his mother because, you know, duh. Though he did end up tracking down, killing, and burying his own mother later. One day, around when he was 18, he fell in love with Trish's mom, and later they would have a daughter, though the boss would remain unaware of this fact. Around when he was 19 though, he killed the priest that raised him after he discovered his mother's remains. He would then burn down the village he lived in, killing many others before vanishing, presumed dead amongst the fire. Back in the present, a man named Doppio gets his fortune read in an alleyway. That is until the fortune teller starts poking into his life, saying that he is from Sardinia, looking for his daughter who he hasn't seen in over a decade. Doppio quickly transforms into a much more physically intimidating form, killing the man with his stand, King Crimson, but not before he pries information about an assassin, Risotto, out of the man. As Doppio travels near the coast, he gets a collect call from the boss, which can seemingly come from anything, informing him that Risotto is nearby, watching him at this very moment. Risotto was a part of the assassination branch that betrayed the boss, in case it wasn't obvious, and is presumably its last standing member. Risotto interrogates Doppio and determines that he is a stand user, and the two engage in battle, with Risotto overwhelming Doppio with his stand, Metallica, in spite of the fact that the boss lent Doppio a part of his stand, as well as the substand, Epitaph, which allows him to see a couple of seconds into the future. Though Risotto has the upper hand, Narancia is lured into third-partying, and during Risotto's last moments, Doppio transforms into the boss and finishes him off. While we're on the topic, let's briefly talk about King Crimson, as people think it's confusing, I suppose. King Crimson has the ability of time erasure. He can effectively erase or skip a couple of seconds in time, leaving only the outcome of what happened during that time remaining. The boss cannot directly hurt anybody during that skip time, but he can use it to avoid attacks. Aside from that though, whatever was fated to happen during that time will happen, and he can use the substand, Epitaph, to peer ahead into time to see what's worth skipping. And as it was revealed in the Risotto versus Doppio fight, the boss and Doppio both inhabit the same body, with Doppio being an alternate personality of the boss, and the boss simply choosing to lend Doppio aspects of his stand when convenient. Okay, so now that that's settled, we cut back to the gang, who is currently split up between Abacchio, who is rewinding 15 years to find the boss's identity, and the rest of the gang, who are in search of a stand user after Narancia spotted the previous battle. Doppio gets away though, and after Abacchio helps a group of kids retrieve their ball, he's quietly assassinated by Doppio using King Crimson, who is disguised as one of those kids. Abacchio succumbs to his wounds, remembering his time as a cop, and decides to help the gang one final time by imprinting the boss's face onto a nearby rock. The gang mourns his death, and though they try to investigate the face on the rock, no leads result from it. It seems like all is lost, when they are contacted by a mysterious third party, who proposes to give them a stand arrow, which he claims is a key to defeating the boss. Wanting them to trust him, he gives them a little information, informing them that the boss's name is Diavolo. This mysterious stranger wants to meet them in Rome, with the gang obliging, seemingly out of options. Diavolo learns of this and tasks Doppio with tracking the group. While we're on the topic of the arrow, we learn that it originated 50,000 years ago in Greenland, in the form of a meteor, and that when inquired upon, scientists learned that in some kind of fucked up exogenesis type thing, harbored an alien virus that, when exposed to a person, would either kill them or grant them a stand. A couple hundred years ago, a man fashioned pieces of the meteor into arrows, which gradually ended up in the hands of the people that we've seen use them in the series at this point. Take that as you will. I remember finding the alien virus part kind of weird, but you know, it's chill now. Diavolo, desperate to preserve his true identity, falls upon Cioccolata and Secco, two human beings, if we're being generous, who are even too vile for Diavolo, the man who tried to kill his own daughter like 5 episodes ago. These two immediately attack the gang when they pull up on the way to Rome, with Cioccolata's Green Day proving itself as a devastating stand. It sends mold that eats anybody when they descend downwards and has a ridiculous range. And even further, when paired with Secco's Oasis, a stand built entirely around digging, they are a truly lethal combo. Though the gang almost immediately gets wiped out, they pull through, with Bruno taking advantage of one key fact that is unbeknownst to everybody at this point. Green Day only attacks living things, and ever since his first encounter with Diavolo way back at the island, he has been dead. A corpse that still perseveres thanks to the life and will that Giorno imbued into him. He kicks Secco out of the fight for the time being, before the gang flees upwards, with Giorno catching on to what is going on with Bruno, though Bruno asks that it remains secret. Cioccolata is taking the high ground with a helicopter, which means that the gang has to work together to reach him while fending off the re-emerging threat of Secco. Giorno, after great struggle and triumph, eventually kills Cioccolata, while Bruno and Secco race towards the Colosseum, where they are to meet the mysterious stranger. Bruno ends up besting Secco in combat by deafening him. Before his death though, he unbeknowingly took Doppio hostage, with Bruno freeing him without harming him. Doppio then helps Bruno to his objective, with Bruno being unable to tell who he is because he's on death's door, simply presuming that it's Trish. The two of them sneak into the Colosseum, confronted by none other than one Jean-Pierre Polnareff, our mysterious third party from earlier. For reference of where Polnareff was in the meantime, he had previously been investigating the arrows with Jotaro. Never mind that it kind of soft retcons Jotaro's surprise at the arrow in part 4. Polnareff had left to Italy by himself to confront Diavolo, who was in possession of some arrows, having stolen them in Egypt by chance after escaping from the town that he had burned down, learning of their use from none other than Enya herself, who he had sold 5 of them to, keeping the 6th for himself. However, Diavolo quickly overwhelmed Polnareff in combat and presumed that he had been killed since, he dismembered him and threw him off of a fucking cliff. But Polnareff instead remained in hiding, now physically disabled and unable to call for outside help due to Passion's monitoring of phone calls in the country. Remembering Polnareff, Diavolo emerges from Doppio, quickly overwhelming him once more, and forcing Polnareff to use the ace up his sleeve, the stand arrow, piercing Silver Chariot with the arrow before seemingly being killed for good. Silver Chariot then evolves into Chariot Requiem, forcing everyone in Rome into a slumber, or switching their souls between bodies, walking away with the arrow. What differentiates a Requiem arrow from something like Bites the Dust? Well, in my opinion, Bites the Dust is probably just a proto-Requiem before Araki figured out how he wanted to flesh out the idea. But the working theory among the fans, though I don't know if it's confirmed, is that a Requiem stand is when a stand user's stand gets pierced by the arrow, while Bites the Dust is something different because the user was pierced. Do with that information as you please. The gang wakes up and realizes what has transpired, with Giorno and Narancia in each other's body, Trish and Mista doing the same, and once more between Bruno and Doppio. Polnareff actually lives on, having been swapped with Coco Jumbo, before revealing the power of Requiem, the brand new ability for a stand to get pierced by a stand arrow and receive even further tremendous, practically unstoppable power. Polnareff had experienced this power himself once before, but was able to quell it, though now Chariot Requiem roams free of Polnareff's will. Any actions taken against Chariot Requiem will draw one's own stand against themselves. This immense power of Requiem may be capable of even surpassing King Crimson in strength. The gang realizes that the boss must be in Bruno's body, but after they finish him off, Narancia dies, having been impaled on a fence. His death was fated to happen, one way or another, at that very moment. This leaves the gang bewildered. Polnareff makes a crazy lucky guess that 2 personalities resided in Diavolo's body, so there is officially an imposter among us. While still pursuing the arrow, they must fend off the threat of King Crimson, as he likely resides in one of their bodies. While confirming visual tasks, King Crimson knocks out Giorno, taking full control of the body that Diavolo was residing in, which happened to be Mista's as he was sharing it with his daughter. As the souls of the people warp around them due to Chariot's influence, which by the way might be worldwide, if not at least as big as Rome, which is crazy, Diavolo, in Mista's body, quickly pursues and crushes Chariot Requiem, almost claiming the arrow for himself. At the same time though, Bucciarati finishes off Chariot, having also discovered that the key to defeating it was in its shadow. Every soul is forced back into their original body, except for Polnareff because we need him to live. But with Bruno returning to his dead body, he is allowed to pass on, giving one final goodbye to Giorno, giving him some new resolve. Using Epitaph, Diavolo foresees that the arrow will not grant him the power he seeks, so he tries to confront Giorno as he pierces his golden experience with the arrow. Though he thinks his attacks were successful, what he was attacking was nothing but a husks, as the new and improved Gold Experience Requiem is here. Diavolo erases time once more to try and finish off Giorno, but the erased time gets restored, with Diavolo's actions having been undone. GER explains that any actions that Diavolo will take against Giorno will be rendered null, with Diavolo himself never being able to reach the truth. This is Requiem. Diavolo gets stand barraged one last time, powerless, before being sentenced to an eternity of dying. Literally, he's in a death loop, never to silence anyone ever again. In the epilogue, we get to see that the fate of those who passed in the group may not have been avoidable, as by messing with the stand Rolling Stones, Mista unintentionally seals the fate of perhaps more people than was necessary. Back in the present though, Giorno swears to protect the arrow, as he recognizes the work, love, and sacrifice that went into being able to acquire it, honoring the sacrifices of his friends by keeping it safe inside of Polnareff's turtle body. Giorno rises to the occasion, and in the true Joestar way, he becomes the leader of Passion, set to reform its ways. And now, we fast forward to 2011 to get back with the main Joestar bloodline. Jolene Cujo is thrown in prison because her boyfriend sold her out for his own vehicular manslaughter. Unbeknownst to the both of them though, this was a ploy from a higher power than either of them, specifically meant to get Jolene thrown in prison. In prison, she gets caught being freaky, which surely was an important enough detail to include in the character introduction of the only female protagonist, but whatever. On the way to Green Dolphin Street Prison, she befriends Hermes Costello, a fellow inmate with a tragic backstory, as her sister was killed in an act of gang violence. Jolene's lawyer was of no use, and she gets sentenced to a fuck ton of time in prison. After receiving items from her estranged father, Jotaro Kujo, whose last name is spelt differently from her own for some reason, she accidentally pricks herself on a pendant that has a piece of the stand arrow inside of it, developing a stand of her own, stone free, which allows her to unravel herself into string, which sounds weak as shit, but remember, she's a Joestar, so it's chill. She meets her cellmate, Gwess, who's a chud that likes shrinking people and making them pretend to be animals through the use of her stand Goo Goo dolls, and she does exactly that with Jolene, almost making her get caught in various inconvenient situations, but Jolene ends up winning because, quite frankly, Gwess is a bum. It's worth noting that Jolene is one of the first Joestars that actually shows very noteworthy character development over the course of the part. She's not exactly timid at the start of Stone Ocean, but she's a lot more headstrong as the part goes on. It's pretty cool. Jolene has a visitor, but this strange kid Emporio tells her that she can't meet him as it will cause something much worse. So when Jolene attempts to inquire about more information, she discovers a pelvis in his stead. Her visitor is none other than Jotaro, here to break her out of prison, though she has no intent to follow along with his plans. He warns of a dangerous prisoner, Jongully A, who was a former disciple of Dio because, what have we learned? Everything ties back to Dio. Jotaro informs her that Jongully was responsible for framing her, and has done so specifically so that he could lure Jotaro in prison and take his revenge for Dio. The man attacks using a sniper rifle and his stand Manhattan Transfer, which he uses to triangulate his targets despite being blind. Though Jolene escapes from the holding cell and seemingly takes care of Jongully, it's revealed that almost all of this sequence of events was an illusion created by a second stand user. But anyways, the two of them escape the holding cell for reals this time, but Jotaro is caught off guard by the real Jongully, allowing the bigger threat here, the stand White Snake, to pull a set of discs out of Jotaro's face, which contain both his memory and Star Platinum respectively. Jotaro gives Jolene a little bit of fatherly recognition before slipping into a near-death-like state, with Jolene resolving to get her father's discs back. She defeats Jongully A and brings Jotaro to the beach to be saved by the Speedwagon Foundation, voluntarily getting reincarcerated to save her father. Though a weakened Jongully thinks he's chill with White Snake, the stand quickly proves otherwise. We get to catch up with Hermes, who, after a famous fever, has developed her own stand Kiss, which lets her duplicate objects by putting stickers on them, with any duplicate merging back into the original with some added damage when the sticker is peeled. Can I just point out that the stand has the same stats as Star Platinum? God damn. She bumps into fellow inmate Thunder McQueen, who then guilt trips Hermes into keeping him and herself alive through his stand Highway to Hell. But, you know, bum-ass stand, it's kinda dealt with rather quickly. Hermes meets Emporio, and he introduces her to the Ghost Room, a part of his stand, which currently houses 2 inmates. Anasui, who is low-key carried in popularity by his design and his stand, fuck his personality, as well as the absolute GOAT Weather Report, giving her the rundown of the situation with Jolene, before she realizes that she has to go back and double tap the bum from earlier. Jolene and Hermes end up volunteering to look for some missing prisoners together, which, because of that bum's memory disk, lets them learn of the existence of a barn full of discs, which they decide to pursue, all while having to play a game of Among Us with the literal colony of plankton in stand form, Foo Fighters. They defeat FF, but Jolene spares them on account of the fact that they kinda had no choice but to obey Whitesnake, as it effectively is responsible for giving them life. FF claims the body of a dead prisoner to use as their own, and Jolene gets back her father's stand disc. Not too far off her trail though is Enrico Pucci, the priest of the prison and the part's villain, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but besides Dio, of course, I think this is pretty much the earliest that we get to see a part's villain. Anyways, Pucci was and still is a loyal servant of Dio, and as we will go on to see, has some of the biggest plans of any JoJo's villain. Though for now, he bribes another inmate into killing Jolene, gifting her the stand of Marilyn Manson. The inmate, Marichon, then approaches the trio of Jolene, FF, and Hermes while they're playing a game of catch, and makes the bet that they can't pass the ball between themselves 100 times. And though it seems easy enough, Hermes technically cheats and gets her liver stolen as compensation for the bet. Jolene and FF eventually win her liver back though, before beating the ever-loving shit out of the lady. Jolene makes a call to see about getting the disc back to the Speedwagon Foundation, so they set up a meeting in the prison courtyard, which is a bad idea, because evidently the higher forces in play here are now clued in as to what's going on. She meets with Emporio beforehand though, who sends Weather Report with her to secure the disc. Weather Report also wields the stand Weather Report, which isn't confusing at all. If I had a nickel for every Part 6 character that shared a name with their stand, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's kinda weird that it happened twice. In case it wasn't obvious though, Weather Report can control weather phenomenon. It's pretty cool. They end up getting jumped by Lang Wrangler, a man with a stupid name, a stupid fit, and an even stupider CGI layup if you're watching the anime. I think the actual adaptation of Part 6 gets a little too much shit, but the step down in quality when Netflix got their grubby hands on it is more than apparent. Also, fuck the batches release, that was some actual bullshit. This is not Stranger Things, just release it weekly, bruh. Lang Wrangler's Jump and Jack Flash nullifies gravity, which through the power of some pseudoscience bullshit, almost kills them. They do end up decommissioning him though. Weather is too injured to continue on, so Jolene unknowingly passes by Pucci, begging for safe passage, which he grants to maintain his facade of innocence. However, while she's in the prison's garden, Whitesnake uses a guard to shoot her. Though Jolene almost loses here, Weather Report has enough strength left in him to summon a bunch of poisonous frogs to fall from the sky, which grants enough time for Jolene to give the disc to a carrier pigeon sent by the Speedwagon Foundation. Thus, Star Platinum will be back in its rightful owner's hands soon. Though this doesn't seem to be too big of a setback for Pucci though, as it's revealed during this encounter that he is really after the memory of Dio's notebook, which had the plan to acquire something called Heaven, whatever that means, and he seeks to learn of it from Jotaro's memory, as he was the one that destroyed Dio's notebook. So the important disc is the memory disc. Later, Hermes kills the guy who murdered her sister, Sportsmax, who attacked her with his army of invisible zombies, known as Limp Bizkit. Why did the zombies have to be invisible? Jolene gets thrown in maximum security with 4 other stand users as punishment for causing Pucci so much trouble, and Emporio learns that Whitesnake had used the zombie guy from earlier to summon a mysterious bone, Dio's last remaining bone, in fact, which has moved itself to the ward that Jolene is in, and after learning of the bone's presence, Jolene accepts to retrieve it. FF learns of this and coerces Anasui into breaking Jolene out of solitary, to which he agrees on the condition that he gets to marry Jolene, because who would have thought? A man with the first name that is literally basically Narcissus is a fucking weirdo. The pair of FF and Anasui break into Jolene's ward, and separately, all of the prisoners are set loose to fight each other, with Jolene being matched up against one of the guards named Westwood. They aren't aware of it, but for the time being, everyone in that ward is under the influence of the stand survivor, which Dio not only had enough awareness of it to dub it the weakest stand, but also somehow he held on to it. Like he just had it in his possession somehow, because Pucci asked for it and Dio was just like, oh yeah, sure, just make sure to fill it up with gas before you give it back. How do you do that? Westwood and Jolene have an absolutely brutal battle under its influence though, with Westwood crashing fucking meteors into Jolene with his stand planet waves. Jolene defeats him before moving on to Kenzo, the wielder of the dumbest fucking stand in the series, Dragon's Dream. It's entirely my opinion, but this and the next stand users are my least favorites in the whole series. Though Jolene and FF get really close to beating the user themselves, Anasui's bum ass intervenes last second after a couple of arcs of doing nothing to turn the guy's legs into springs. Hilarious. We get a little cutaway to Jotaro, who is sorta waking up now that Star Platinum is back in his body, and though he's slowly decaying at the moment, a self-inflicted wound spells out the name Jolene, and simultaneously, Jolene has a realization that Jotaro was not distant during her childhood because of his own desires, but rather because he wanted to keep her safe from the messed up mess of Dio that he was stuck cleaning up. It's kind of beautiful actually. Continuing onwards and cucking Anasui in the process, Jolene watches as the prisoner she saw holding Dio's bone turns himself into a plant, seemingly. In fact, it wasn't turning himself into a plant. Every prisoner's corpse in that room turns into a plant simultaneously. Dio's bone then fuses with the plants and turns into this weird green baby that has the Joestar birthmark. Could this be Dio? And what does this mean for Heaven? Well, we'll find out after this fuck-ass bum stand battle. But first, Survivor's user is disposed of, revealing this arc's stand user, DNG, wielding Yo-Yo Ma, an automatic tracking stand that tries to eat people when least expected. It eats the green baby right after they vow to keep it out of Whitesnake's hands. They can't hurt Yo-Yo-Ma though, so they just keep him around while they try to escape the punishment ward, as FF splits off to find its user. We get yet another battle where the afflicted main character can't communicate exactly what's going on because of the enemy stand. A gimmick that I kinda really don't care for since it's like the third time this has been done. But it's okay because Anasui deals with Yo-Yo-Ma by fusing its brain to that of a frog's, disabling it functionally. This truthfully might raise a bunch of questions about stand anatomy that I'm not sure Araki considered initially, but whatever. Elsewhere, as FF is about to execute Yo-Yo-Ma's user, Pucci is celebrating the upcoming birth of the green baby, as it brings him one step closer to the fabled heaven plan. But FF discovers that Pucci is the user of Whitesnake and makes the resolve to fight Pucci. Cherishing her memories with the gang in spite of the prevalent threat of having her autonomy taken away by Whitesnake, FF kills DNG in front of Pucci, but gets injured in the process and is forced to flee. All the while, the green baby is born from Yo-Yo-Ma's corpse. When Jolene and Anasui try to pursue it, they shrink exponentially the closer they get, never allowing them to reach it, thanks to its stand green grass of home, though the baby does end up eventually becoming chill with the pair. Meanwhile, FF radios Weather Report for help after Pucci almost kills them with an unnamed boiling water stand. They get the help they need and run like the wind. Weather Report then meets with Jolene, Anasui, and FF in a field, except it's not Weather Report, but rather Whitesnake in disguise, using that illusion ability that it literally only uses one other time at the beginning of the part. Whitesnake almost kills Anasui and FF, but Pucci himself ends up cuffed to Jolene in a one-on-one brawl. Though Jolene is obviously close to winning, Pucci plays dirty, throwing Jotaro's memory disk into Anasui's dying body, and with the present threat of her father's memory disappearing forever, she forfeits the fight and goes to rescue the disk. Pucci, on the other hand, approaches the green baby, reciting a 14-word password to force the baby to fuse with him. As Anasui seems to be dying and all hope is lost, FF uses the last of their strength in their colony to keep Anasui alive, allowing themselves to pass on, bidding Jolene farewell. A newly dripped out Pucci leaves the prison, as it was merely a means for him to reach his goals, and speaking of, it's here that we learn exactly what the heaven plan is, or more specifically what the steps of it are. We don't really know the end goal yet. So allow me to go over them as we ponder how the fuck Dio figured this out by himself. First, you need a trustworthy friend, like one that is free of all physical desires to give your bone to. Except instead of the bone, it was supposed to be the world, but a bone works fine for now. Then you need somebody who can revive that bone. Then after said bone is revived, you kill 36 sinners. After which, the bone will fuse with those sinners and create the green baby. After the green baby is born, you tell it these 14 innocuous phrases and it'll fuse with you, and after all that is done, you must go to this one spot in Florida on the day of the new moon, and then you'll get heaven. How the fuck did he figure this out? And why didn't Dio bring this up like at all during part 3? Who knows, maybe it was like a side hobby for him, like, you know, crocheting or some shit. Anyways, it's just something that exists, and Pucci is essentially on the second to last step of the heaven plan. Back to business, Pucci is gone from the prison, and having read Jotaro's memory disk, Jolene intends to escape the prison to pursue him, but she gets trapped by the stand jailhouse lock, which basically just gives her dementia, though she overcomes it in large part due to a puddle. I'm not kidding you. And Jolene, Hermes, and Emporio escape prison, with Anasui and Weather Report following suit shortly after, since both Weather Report and Pucci have developed the Joestar birthmark. As Pucci travels the state, he finds himself the victim of several odd coincidences, declaring that Whitesnake is not his stand anymore, which, spoilers, for the time being, is just not true. He then ends up meeting with Ungalo, Raquel, and Donatello, 3 of Dio's bastard kids who have ended up in Florida to meet Pucci courtesy of Fate's invisible hand. Now, clever viewer, you might be wondering, oh my god, does that mean we get to see Giorno in part 6? No, Araki just stated that he's at Disneyland or some shit.
Alright.
Weather Report and Anasui end up defeating the potentially world-ending stand Bohemian Rhapsody through the powers of some absolute bullshit, but it's funny bullshit, so I'll let it slide. But like, low-key, Ungalo's a dumbass. I'd just draw a Goku whose only goal in life is to end the Joestar bloodline or some shit like that. Jolene makes a pit stop, unaware of Bohemian Rhapsody's chaos apparently, to get a helicopter from her ex-boyfriend, before she has Hermes beat the shit out of him, cause, you know, duh. However, on board said helicopter, which is being piloted by Emporio for some reason, they are attacked by these cryptids called rods, a supposed skyfaring species of Anomalocaris that are being controlled by Raquel, one of the other Dio's kids. This was a real phenomenon, by the way, back in the 2000s. People really thought there was a skyfaring species of Anomalocaris that you could take pictures of, but it's just like long exposure photography of bugs in the air. Kinda cool looking though. Raquel's rods are attracted to and leech off of body heat, which Jolene discovers and counters by lighting herself on fire. After getting beaten, Raquel informs the gang that Pucci and Weather Report are brothers. The gang continues towards the hospital that Pucci is posted up at, before being ambushed by Donatello's underworld, which traps them in events in history, in this case a plane crash. Jolene and Hermes escape the situation, obviously, but during the course of the battle, Pucci is low-key kind of rage-baiting Donatello, which causes him to steal Weather Report's memory disk off of Pucci's memory in the earth. After losing, he delivers it to Weather Report personally, which unlocks a hidden aspect of Weather Report's stand, Heavy Weather, which, long story short, subliminally messages people into transforming into snails. It's here though that we get insight into the brothers. Pucci and Weather Report are twins, but Weather was stolen at birth by a grieving lady, who switched him out with her dead child. Growing up, Pucci takes interest in the church. He meets Dio one day inside of said church, who leads him astray, enticing him with whims of heaven, and one day, through the gravity of the universe, Pucci meets the mother who took Weather Report. Though he keeps her confession a secret as per his duty, he investigates Weather as he's dating Pucci's sister and as such unintentionally his own sister. Not being one for anime tropes, Pucci accidentally pays the clan to break them up. The clan investigates Weather and learns that his mother had married an African American man. And yeah, you can see where this is going. They try to claim Weather's life, and Perla, the sister/girlfriend situation, still unaware of why this happened, cuts him down and thinks he's dead, opting for the Shakespearean way out. However, Weather in fact lived, and Pucci, grieving his sister, gets pierced by the arrow and gains White Snake out of a desire to keep his sister's memory alive, subsequently gifting Weather Report his own stand as a result of twin shenanigans. A couple of days after this, the phenomenon Heavy Weather manifested, forcing Pucci to confront Weather, informing him of the fact that they are brothers before taking his memory, eventually locking him away in prison. It's tragic stuff actually, and I'll low-key never forgive Netflix for covering my favorite arc of part 6 with just fucking constant layers of CGI snails. Sorry, had to get that one out. Pucci pulls up to Weather to try and kill him, having prepared for this scenario by temporarily blinding himself, rendering himself immune to the snail propaganda. Weather takes advantage of this though and almost finishes off the priest, who, by the way, his stand is still White Snake here. But Jolene and the rest of the gang end up crashing into the fight with a car courtesy of Donatello, which allows Pucci to win the fight, killing Weather. The group keeps his stand disc though, which was at the scene of the crime, with Emporio essentially just holding onto it just in case. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Pucci makes it to the Kennedy Space Center, becoming the center of a new gravity phenomenon as, for real this time, White Snake is no longer his stand. The gang pulls up to the area as well, discovering that this phenomenon extends very far out, something like 2 kilometers, forcing them to traverse the road as if it were a cliff upwards. Upon arriving at the physical space center though, they are attacked by Pucci's new stand, Sea Moon, which makes Pucci the center of gravity in a 2-kilometer radius, while the actual stand, Sea Moon, can flip things inside out with just a touch, which is stupidly strong for a long-range stand. I know that the stand strength typically refers to their actual physical prowess, but like, Jesus. After a bit of trial and error, Pucci commands Sea Moon to hit Jolene on the chest and finish her off once and for all, which seems to be successful, but a text from none other than a freshly reawakened Jotaro Kujo reveals that she is still alive somewhere, even if just barely. As Jolene would reveal herself, she made use of a Mobius strip, a shape with only one continuous side that cannot be turned inside out, to save herself and ward off Sea Moon's assault. Pucci ends up trying to resort to the old and faithful gun technique, to which time stops, and Jotaro pulls up just in time to save his daughter. Oh, and Hermes is there too. It kinda looked like she died for a second, but let's be for real. As Pucci is cornered and almost loses, he realizes that the coordinates in the notebook paired with the new moon are not set in stone. He doesn't need a date. Rather, he needs the gravity provided by being in that location on that date. So, using Sea Moon, he manipulates his gravity, stealing a spaceship to achieve the very gravity that he needs, awakening made in heaven. The group wakes up and realizes that time is accelerating, with chaos and panic being widespread as the rest of the world catches up to speed. The only things unaffected are living things, and the only one able to keep up with this accelerated time is Pucci himself. The group makes their last stand, and though the party anticipates Pucci's attack, not even stopping time is enough, as the group one by one falls. Jolene almost perishes, but lasts long enough to get Emporio out of Pucci's reach, before sacrificing herself in one last brave moment. Time accelerates to the point of the universe reaching a singularity and restarting. However, time seemingly stops accelerating, as Pucci has halted his plan to finish off Emporio. With the universe restarting and living beings from the previous universe being brought through, their fate has effectively been burned into them, so everybody knows what their outcome in life will be. This is Pucci's idea of heaven, as he believes that beings who are bearing the knowledge of their fate will be able to find inner peace by accepting it. However, he had no intent to bring the Joestar's feud into this new universe, and he now attempts to cull Emporio to tie up all of the loose ends. Forcing Emporio to enact his fate, the two of them end up in his ghost room, but unbeknownst to Pucci, he has forced fate's hand, unintentionally inserting Weather Report's stand disc into Emporio's head, which promptly crushes and kills him. With Pucci being unable to stop the universe's acceleration, he unintentionally overwrites his own existence as yet another universe is created. Anybody who was killed before the universe restart does not carry over to the previous one. In this third universe, Emporio finds himself outside of the prison, meeting alternate reincarnated forms of his friends. Jolene is now called Irene, and Anasui is now called Anakis, among other changes. Hermes is also here, now called Eldis. Though they carry the same spirit and emotions, they find themselves in a universe where they are free from the Joestar curse of being condemned to fight evil for all eternity. When Jolene asks Emporio's name, he simply cries at the loss of his original friends, stating that his name is in fact Emporio. The group departs, free in spirit at last, embarking to meet up with Jotaro, and picking up Weather Report on the way. We finally have a conclusive ending. Wait, why is there still more? So yeah, completely unrelated to all of the new universe shenanigans in Part 6, Parts 7 through 9 exist in their own alternate universe. There are recurring characters from the previous universe, but it's more like a soft reboot as the stories are completely different in and of themselves. This leads us into the actual peak fiction that is Steel Ball Run. The year is 1890, and we get introduced to a couple of characters who will be around for the duration of the race. Starting off with Sandman, he is kicked out of his tribe for reading, quote, the white man's books, and decides to enter the Steel Ball Run race to try and save his tribe. He bids his sister goodbye after pointing out an area where somebody was training with a spherical object. What is the Steel Ball Run? Well, the Steel Ball Run is the titular horse race that the part's story centers around. Sponsored by one wealthy Mr. Stephen Steele and his 14-year-old wife, racers will travel mostly by horseback across the entire continental United States of America, passing through 9 different stages or checkpoints along the way for cash and time bonuses. The race runs from San Diego to New York and begins on the 25th of September, 1890, but before that we meet a couple more contenders. Obviously we have Sandman, but now we have Poco Loco, a recently emancipated slave who learns that his luck is immense and decides to try out said luck on horse racing. And also, we have some important names to remember, as they are the favorites to win the race. Mountain Tim and Diego Brando, who may or may not sound familiar. At the entry, a young Italian man, Gyro Zappelli, enters the race, only to almost get robbed. But it's okay, because with the power of his steel balls, he makes the burglar take the less fortunate way out of their duel. Witnessing this, though, is Johnny Joestar, a paraplegic former horse jockey who, after becoming a bit of a brat courtesy of being a rich and famous horse jockey at a young age, gets shot and neglected by his family after cutting in line for a movie with a girl. Johnny reaches for Gyro's steel ball, and when it makes his legs move again, even if for just a second, Johnny vows to enter the race and make Gyro teach him how to do it again. He buys a horse, which is fucking old and hates him, but he ends up mounting it after great struggle by spinning himself. In the first and one of the shortest stages, Gyro ends up taking the lead rather early, demonstrating not only great horsemanship, but also that he is very fluent in the art of his steel balls, or perhaps more interestingly, this part's way more developed ripple substitute, the spin. In spite of the lucky Poco Loco and his hype man stand Heya, the pompous horse jockey Diego, and even this part's Avdol, Gyro ends up claiming first place in the stage, except not really because one of his steel balls was kinda thrown with the intent of hurting Poco Loco, which ends up hurting Sandman, leading to him getting penalized. It's okay though, because Johnny was able to maintain a decent pace with him, and seems to have built at least a little friendly rapport with the young man. We get a glimpse into Mr. Steele's past, where during a period when he was down on his luck, a young Lucy Pendleton, yes, Pendleton, as in Arena for some reason, suggests the idea of the race to him, which gets him rich after a couple of sponsors take interest in it, leading him to marry her out of kindness, which I know sounds weird, you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. Back in the present, Gyro takes his penalty well and lets Johnny follow him, as well as informing him of the spin's existence. Steven and his wife are taken to a crime scene where several people were murdered during the course of the first stage, leading Mountain Tim to be put in charge of finding the culprit, though he makes a brief pit stop to try and raise up the kid, which, mind you, he only doesn't pursue because she's married and not the obvious elephant in the room. The second stage is much longer, tasking them with crossing 750 miles of Arizona desert, as opposed to the mere 9-mile first stage. Johnny and Gyro are attacked by Miss Robinson, who is actually a dude. Like, Miss Robinson is actually just his name. Miss Robinson uses insects that he raises in his eye socket to force jumping cactus needles to fly at his foes. It's not even a stand attack or anything, this guy's just fucking nasty. The duo makes quick work of him. During the night, however, Gyro teaches Johnny a little bit about the spin, and after Johnny notices a mysterious emblem on Gyro's passport, they are approached by a man who claims to be bitten by a poisonous lizard. They reluctantly toss the man a piece of their campfire for him to clean his wound, which proves to be a mistake, as they are jumped by a family who shares the stand Tomb of the Boom, which can affect magnetism when all 3 members are in a circle. The duo escapes the family, and with Mountain Tim hot on their trail, the father of the family disguises himself as Johnny Joestar. Mountain Tim, after a failed encounter with the father, catches up to the real Johnny and Gyro, with the trio realizing that they are at the epicenter of a potentially fatal attack from the enemy. Tim shows off his stand, O Lonesome Me, and gives a bit of exposition about a phenomenon known as the Devil's Palm, several pieces of moving land on the continent that, when passed through, can give someone a stand. The theory is that this phenomenon exists because of a meteor, similar to that of the original universe's stand origins, but the truth is much stranger than even that. More on that in a minute though. During the final confrontation with the family, Johnny utilizes what he thinks is a part of the spin, in the form of shooting his nails like bullets. Though, as we'll come to learn, they're currently passing through the Devil's Pond, and Johnny Joestar has just acquired his stand, Tusk. They dispose of the family and continue to their next destination. Their travels are intercut by Gyro's backstory, as he comes from a family of royal executioners for the Kingdom of Naples. But after a poor boy hears of a revolution and doesn't say anything of it, he is put to execution, with Gyro slated to be the one to do the job. Obviously not cool with this, Gyro joins the race to emancipate the boy, through the combined powers of the king's amnesty and the prize money. Upon arriving in town, the trio is attacked by Oya Kamova, who wields a stand that roughly translates to "listen to my rhythm," a knockoff killer queen that can have more active bombs at once, though they are not as powerful. Mountain Tim is decommissioned in the fight, but as the fight continues up a waterfall, Gyro and Johnny beat Oya Kamova with a dual attack as bros. It's pretty awesome. The fight was also a simultaneous sub-race as they were trying to reach what Gyro calls the zombie horse. This part's explanation for why the gang isn't always in fucking shambles. Seemingly at random, we get a bit of backstory for Jesus Christ, and more specifically, how after he resurrected, in Jojo's lore, he bestowed a map to Joseph of Arimathea, which has 9 marks on it, but the map depicted a yet unknown land at the time. Though it doesn't take a genius to point out that this map is of America, I'm sure you can put at least a little bit of the puzzle together with just that information. The gang quickly disposes of F.V. Stroheim, a cyborg similar to his Part 2 counterpart, but who is unable to compete in firepower with the art of the spin. Johnny falls off of his horse, and coming out of his arm is yet another arm, but mummified, which ends up submerging itself into his skin. Johnny just kind of moves on with his day though, because realistically, what do you do about that? Elsewhere, we get a glimpse into a meeting that Steven Steele is having with the President of the United States, Funny Valentine, who is currently looking a little different than you might have seen him. The bulk is crazy, but it's okay, because the cut will be even crazier. Valentine is in possession of Joseph of Arimathea's map, and is searching for pieces of a corpse that can be found along that map, sending an assassin to check and see if our duo is in possession of a part, before revealing that he is the owner of the corpse's heart. The assassin reaches the duo, this little guy named Pork Pie Hat Kid. No, I'm not kidding. That is his legal name. His stand, Wired, allows him to hook people through a portal using a fishing rod that is fixed inside of his mouth. He stealthily takes out Gyro before pursuing Johnny. While hiding under a rock, Johnny gets to see his tusk for the first time, a small and seemingly frail stand, but one that tells him to move his legs, before permitting him the ability to do so for a minuscule amount of time. Having seen the miracle that the corpse part gifted him, and realizing that the assassin is after the arm, Johnny resolves to save Gyro, wanting to see what the full corpse can offer. The duo defeats the runt before moving on, with Gyro having no clue about the corpse's origin, only noting that it must be that of a saint's. It's also here that Johnny notes the steel ball run's true purpose, as the stages of the race must be areas with pieces of the corpse, with whatever benefactor wanting stand users to find the pieces of the corpse for them. And of course, said benefactor is the President of the United States himself. In the last chunk of the second stage, they realize that the next piece is atop a nearby mountain. Diego ends up passing them at the last second, which pisses Gyro off, but it's okay because they discover an injured Diego later, who passes out in the fossil of a Yitzhak, which by the way looks fucking awesome. Diego later catches up to them, seemingly refreshed but needing a little bit of lotion. That night though, Diego crashes their slumber party by turning into a dinosaur himself. Before he starts fucking shit up though, we get a glimpse into the tragic backstory of Diego, as a series of unfortunate events causes the death of his mother at a young age, with Diego swearing to rise to the top at all costs, resenting the rest of humanity. Okay, back in the present, the gang has to evade a series of attacks from dinosaurs of various sizes as they attempt to pursue the corpse part. Diego's stand, Scary Monsters, can turn people into dinosaurs through viruses, and wouldn't you know it, the duo is afflicted by it as well. Atop the mountain though, they are confronted by Dr. Ferdinand, who is the actual user of Scary Monsters, merely placing Diego as the head of the pack. Though it's a close call, Gyro gets the right eye of the saint's corpse, as well as the ability to scan objects with the steel balls. Not quite a stand, but an upgrade nonetheless. They defeat Dr. Ferdinand, but in the commotion that follows, Diego steals the left eye for himself, retaining the ability Scary Monsters because of the corpse part. Gyro challenges Diego in the final part of the third stage, but as Johnny predicts, he loses, as Gyro does not yet have the hunger to win that Diego does. However, to the surprise of everyone, the actual first place of the race, Hot Pants, passed through ages ago. We get a little more of a glimpse into Valentine's motivations, as after discovering the map as a politician, he sponsored the Steel Ball Run to try and assemble the corpse for himself, wanting the power that it offers. In the present, Johnny and Gyro scuffle with Hot Pants during the fourth stage over a stolen cow. They end up making peace, though Hot Pants is a stand user, wielding the meat in a spray can cream starter. Yep, that's a name. During their scuffle though, Gyro's scan ability reveals clues to the location of the next corpse part, which is near the next goal. Continuing onwards, the three of them realize that no matter where they go in the forest they're traveling through, they always end up back at the start. A quick pit stop to a cabin in the area and a cowboy duel later, they learn that the culprit is Ringo Road again, wielding the time rewinding Mandem, which can rewind time 6 seconds, but also leaves those affected by it with their memories of said rewinded time. Ringo refuses to fight Gyro and makes quick work of Johnny and Hot Pants when put to a duel. And though Gyro struggles with his own doubts, and overcoming said doubts, he is able to kill Ringo Road again, and is welcomed into the true man's world. The trio heals up, with Johnny discovering in a rather odd fashion that Hot Pants is a woman, like, duh, but he keeps her secret to himself. Gyro and Johnny pass Sandman, who informs the two that Diego is in the lead, and that a storm is coming. The two of them then realize that Ringo sent a message to Valentine about the corpse parts, and that Diego likely also knows about the spine since he has the other eye. Elsewhere, Lucy Steele decides to steal Ringo's message after she determines that her husband is being used, and as such is in danger. She is pursued by Valentine and his henchman Blackmore, but is saved by Mountain Tim, who offers her comfort and a place in his bed one last time before respecting her wishes and telling her to meet with Gyro and Johnny, as it seems that they share a common enemy. After she leaves, Mountain Tim gets slimed out by Blackmore, who floats through the air with his rain-wielding stand, Catch the Rainbow. Blackmore realizes who the intruder was and pursues Lucy, who is also on the way to retrieve the corpse part. He steals the spine from her, seeing a glimpse of Jesus himself, before almost getting murdered by Lucy, who claims the part back for herself. Blackmore plugs his wounds with frozen raindrops, acknowledging his impending doom once the storm is over, before pursuing Lucy once more. Gyro, having experienced character growth recently, is able to incapacitate Diego's horse, and the two of them meet with Lucy, though they have to take care of Blackmore real quick, which works rather splendidly as the storm passes. The spine then reveals several corpse parts at once to the group, and they bring Lucy back to town with them to avoid having suspicion placed on her. They entrust her with disabling Valentine's stand by stealing the corpse's heart from him, with Gyro bestowing the right eye onto her. He loses his scan ability, but ends up gaining an ally. Lucy goes on her way to accomplish this, and Gyro and Johnny cross the 4th stage's finish line. Though Diego fumbles on the racing front, he levels up his politics stat and makes a deal with the president to fetch the corpse for him in exchange for the island of Manhattan, though obviously Valentine has no intent to follow through with this. He's gifted a hunting buddy though, and while Gyro and Johnny are discussing the potential identity of the corpse, who the audience now knows as Jesus, they are attacked by sound-imbued dinosaurs. The duo ends up fleeing to a river when Gyro is forced to abandon his steel balls. With no better learning opportunity than the very moment they're in, Gyro teaches Johnny that, truthfully, he does not know shit, and needs to master something called the golden rotation in order to perfect his spin. By using the spin in a specific ratio, they can achieve an infinite rotation. Gyro gets wounded though, and though Johnny wants to resort to a scale as a reference, he realizes that the golden rectangle is in nature all around them, leveling up his spin mastery as well as his tusk, granting him Tusk Act 2. Though he's only able to shoot them one at a time, Johnny's nail bullets now pack a significantly higher amount of impact, and they're tracking now. The user of the sound stand, in a silent way, is none other than Sandman, or Soundman as is his actual name. He ends up getting bested by a makeshift steel ball despite thinking that he narrowly secured the victory. After winning though, the duo gets hard third-partied by Hot Pants, who claims 99% of the corpse part for the Vatican, leaving Johnny with only a tiny piece of the spine before making it apparent that she takes no joy in taking the parts from the pair. In the snow, and near the beginning of the 6th stage, they discover that they are being pursued by 11 men. What are these men's names? Well shit. They stumble upon a young girl inside of a tree stump named Sugar Mountain, who offers them the chance to be honest in order to get rewards. They obtain a metric fuckton of money and riches, as well as the ears and the right arm of the corpse from her, before learning that they must use everything they gained before sundown, lest they become one with the tree. Any attempt to spend the wealth ends up providing even more money than they could spend. Hell, at one point even more than the steel ball run itself would offer. But it would seem we have a pair of high rollers on our hand as they double it even more, before being interrupted by the 11 men from earlier with their stand Tattoo U, which is apparently intentionally misspelled. Gyro gets rid of the wealth by hiring the whole casino to be their bodyguards and help them. But just as it seems like they're in the clear, Gyro starts turning into the tree, forcing Johnny to give the corpse parts away to the enemy in exchange for some wine. Gyro returns to normal, but the two of them effectively lost everything. Gyro, though, remembering his time with his father, makes a toast with Johnny to the ball that hit the net, or in other words, the outcomes that are out of our own hands, and to the next corpse parts in the goal. It's a really beautiful moment, honestly. Like, when can you recall a moment where a JoJo's character loses so hard, like the main character? It doesn't really happen a whole lot. Valentine hires an assassin to track the intruder from that night in Kansas City, which is unfortunate, because Lucy Steele is here to try and steal the corpse heart. She decides to go through the avenue of Valentine's wife, Scarlet, which, for my sake, let's just say it doesn't go well. It's fucking nasty. The bizarre sequence of events results in Scarlet's death. Hot Pants provides an assist to get the assassin off of her back, but Lucy is forced to disguise herself as Valentine's wife to get closer to him, with Hot Pants taking the heart for herself in the meantime. Across a frozen strait, Gyro and Johnny are attacked by Weka Pipo, a steel ball user who is a royal guard from Gyro's country, and Magenta, who wields the invincible stand 20th Century Boy. In this desolate plain, the golden rectangle is unavailable to the duo, but through either a series of coincidences according to Gyro, or fate according to Weka Pipo, Gyro and Johnny end up getting the upper hand, decommissioning the duo for now, and earning not only Weka Pipo's trust and his aid in protecting Lucy, but also the corpse's legs from a nearby wolf. It seems that things are turning up for the pair as they finish the 6th stage in 1st place. That is, until in Gettysburg, Gyro and Johnny discover Hot Pants and are shortly thereafter attacked by Axl Rowe and his Civil War, which manifests people's guilt and attacks them with it lest they are able to sacrifice it. Though Hot Pants and Gyro's guilt comes from pretty substantial objects and people, Johnny's originates from a white mouse, the fabled Danny, back in action, and kinda sorta being the reason that Johnny's brother died, unless you want to blame Diego, which is also a very likely scenario. Johnny kills the stand user, but this rebirths Axl, bestowing his sins to Johnny. When all seems lost, the reaffirming advice of Jesus himself offers Johnny a new path. By using his golden rotation on himself, Johnny can enter a wormhole that may provide an advantageous path for him to continue on. This is Tusk Act 3. Johnny scuffles with Axl once more, making quick work of his sins, but Axl kills him when he threatens to destroy the corpse, thus gifting his sins right back to him. When the battle seems like it's won, none other than Funny Valentine pulls up and slimes him, taking the whole corpse for himself, save for the head and the eyes. We get a little bit more insight into Lucy and Steven's marriage, as Steven had merely married her to save her from being forced into prostitution, with the two of them never having relations further than that of great friends, despite what other people may think. Back with Lucy, who is still disguised as Scarlet, she accidentally makes it known that she has interest in the corpse. Valentine details that he wants to use the corpse to have the ultimate leverage against the rest of the world, by having the respect and power needed to take the first napkin. He makes a move on Lucy, but when her true identity is revealed, he is seemingly indifferent or overjoyed, and attempts to pursue it once more anyways. That is when Lucy stabs him, and while he's writhing on the floor, he forces a chair to fall on top of himself, allowing him to disappear and reappear unharmed. Though Lucy tries to hide, she discovers the corpse in a chimney, and Valentine discovers that he already has the head of the corpse in his possession. And it's merely a matter of time, as Lucy has been endowed with it, which sounds gross because quite frankly it is. It's supposed to be an allusion to the Virgin Mary, but it's really, really weird. During this ordeal though, we finally get to see Valentine's stand, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, otherwise known as D4C for short. Lucy is now the corpse's host though, and Valentine no longer needs the heart to maintain his stand, similarly to how Johnny no longer needs a corpse heart to maintain Tusk. Steven Steele is missing his wife when he discovers that Lucy is Scarlet, though he is unaware how. That is when Magenta pulls up and tries to kill him, though he is stopped by Wekapipo, who ties him up in the ocean, forcing him to have a Cars moment as he hopes for rescue by Diego. Gyro and Johnny then enter Philadelphia at the 7th goal and decide to steal the left eye from Diego, though that already difficult task becomes increasingly harder as the president makes his presence known, with Johnny simultaneously getting shot by the president, Wekapipo, and Diego Brando through some stand shenanigans. In fact, it was none other than D4C, whose ability here kinda gets retconned into being simpler later, but here's how it goes. In this instant, D4C's ability is to allow separate parallel worlds to exist all at once. So in this explanation, Valentine made a reality where Wekapipo shoots Johnny, where Diego shoots Johnny, and where he himself shoots Johnny, real, simultaneously. But D4C's ability ends up getting simplified to allowing Valentine to travel between parallel worlds by pressing himself between objects. He can bring other people or objects with him, but any identical objects or people will be destroyed upon meeting their counterpart, save for Valentine himself. Valentine can also give D4C to other Valentines, giving the illusion of immortality, though every time we see Valentine use this to quote heal, it's actually a different Valentine. But the new Valentine gets the previous Valentine's memories, and all Valentines behave similarly enough and want similar things, so it functionally is the same Valentine. Makes sense, right? Probably not, but whatever. Another important part is that our SBR universe is the only one that has the corpse parts, and thus there is only one D4C. Back to it though, when Diego attempts to kill Valentine, Valentine forces him into another world, and Diego is forced to escape by sacrificing Wekapipo. Even if he is a more sympathetic Dio, he is still Dio. Diego resolves even harder to take out Valentine and claim the corpse for himself. Lucy gets contacted by what she thinks is the corpse after fearing for her and her husband's life, and after developing her own stand, Ticket to Ride, she escapes with Steven, only to realize that the voice was not the corpse's, but Valentine's. Having claimed both the right and left eye from Lucy and Diego respectively, Valentine kidnaps the pair of Steven and Lucy, and departs via a ship towards their final destination. Gyro picks up Johnny after he got shot, and though Gyro debates abandoning the search for the corpse, Johnny stands briefly, reinforcing his resolve to walk once more. Seeing no other choice, Gyro decides to teach Johnny about the ultimate level of spin. When combined with the horse running in the golden rectangle, a spin achieved in the golden ratio by the horseback rider can achieve the highest level of the spin, a hypothetical, perfect, infinite rotation, though this has not yet been achieved in execution. The pair now sets their sights on Valentine once and for all. Before that though, Diego and Hot Pants strike a deal to take down Valentine in exchange for giving Hot Pants the corpse. Boarding a train that Valentine is on, they attack Valentine directly, and though they get surprisingly far, when Diego pulls Valentine off of the train, declaring his victory, Valentine forces him under it, giving him the the topical anime death treatment. Still aboard the train, Hot Pants witnesses Lucy's body merging with the corpse, creating a new phenomenon before she is killed by Valentine. Valentine stops to awe at the phenomenon, as the corpse effectively evolves D4C into something greater, D4C Love Train, which has the ability to redirect misfortune elsewhere, offering Valentine a seeming reward for assembling the corpse. Johnny and Gyro have one last bro talk before they depart to fight Valentine, where Gyro reveals that his real name is Julius Caesar Zappelli, or Kaiser as it's actually pronounced. Gyro is merely a nickname. Johnny also drops some freaky shit, but whatever. Yes, this is my goat. As they face Valentine head on, any and all attacks on him are redirected elsewhere in the world. We talk a lot about the invincible stand, but Love Train truly seems to have accomplished just that. The only attacks that land are when D4C is forced out of Love Train's light. A tiny scratch on Gyro seemingly grows worse and begins working its way towards Gyro's heart. When all seems hopeless, one of Gyro's steel balls returns with a bit of Valentine's hair on it after he attempts the perfect rotation that he spoke of earlier. There is a way through. The two of them pursue Valentine even harder, and just as Johnny is about to complete the perfect rotation, Valentine cuts his arm off. Gyro seemingly wastes a steel ball to solve for Johnny's life, before fleeing with Lucy and forcing Valentine to come to him through Love Train's light. Gyro's ball wasn't a waste though, as it took off a bit of Valentine's ear. Gyro is cornered at the ocean, but produces an almost perfect rotation, producing his own stand, Ball Breaker, which bypasses Love Train, aging the left half of Valentine's face and body. However, the light from Love Train messed up his ball, ruining the perfect rotation that he created. This forces Gyro's wound to reach his heart, as he's unwilling to step into Love Train and get rid of it. But before Gyro passes away, he teaches Johnny lesson 5 of the spin, that sometimes the shortest route is a detour. He collapses, with Valentine making sure to double tap Gyro in front of Johnny to confirm his death. Valentine approaches and wounds Johnny's horse, and just as all seems lost, Johnny finally picks up on Gyro's last words, using a steel ball on his horse to create the rotation he's been seeking to achieve. His horse kicks him, imbuing that perfect energy into him, allowing Johnny to achieve a new infinite rotation in the form of Tusk Act 4. Act 4 wastes no time tearing apart Love Train's barrier, barraging D4C and imbuing him with energy that follows him no matter how many times he transfers D4C to a new Valentine. Valentine is condemned to die no matter how hard he tries to escape. A flashback shows us a time when a young Valentine learned of the values of patriotism through the sacrifice of his father as a prisoner of war. His future stepfather bestowed these values to him through his father's tragic tale, before gifting him a handkerchief that had Valentine's birthday embroidered on it, which was apparently one of his father's most valued possessions. Valentine recomposes himself and goes to meet with the base world's Johnny Joestar one last time to strike a deal. He admits defeat and offers to bring back an alternate version of Gyro if Johnny reverses the infinite rotation. He even gifts him an alternate cream starter so he can heal himself, his horse, and Lucy's steel. He appeals to Johnny's emotions, making a valiant speech, speaking of his father and promising to leave them alone forever so long as he gets to keep the corpse for the sake of the country. He almost convinces Johnny, but as one final test, he tosses Valentine his gun and tells him to pick it up. But Valentine hesitates and attempts to reach for a gun he had hidden, which causes the two guns to collide, as they were both Valentine's guns, but from separate worlds. One last shootout ensues, with Johnny finally putting Valentine down for good. Gyro finally ascends to heaven, bidding Johnny farewell. After mourning Gyro, Johnny gets up and heals everybody, demonstrating that he can now fully use his legs, even without any of the corpse parts. Upon going to retrieve the corpse though, he realizes that it has already been stolen by a final obstacle. Johnny attempts to chase the unknown enemy, having been warned by Steven Steele about a vault for the corpse, which is presumably where the enemy is headed. At last, as he pursues him, the final threat is revealed to be none other than an alternate universe version of Diego, which doesn't wield scary monsters since the corpse parts don't exist in the other universes, but rather the world. Valentine approached an alternate universe Diego as a contingency plan in case he had failed to convince Johnny, promising him all of the power that he could want in exchange for storing the corpse. As he pursues him through the final stage of the race, he spots his father in the crowd. Aw, it's too bad that guy fucking sucks. The battle is close, with Tusk being able to move and time stop, but as Johnny gets a shot off on the world, Diego cuts its leg off and tosses it to Johnny, transferring the infinite rotation to him, condemning him to a slow, painful death. Diego reaches a vault and is stopped by none other than Lucy. The Diddy nostalgia merchant makes a move on the young lady, because why wouldn't he? But is then met with his own head, which Lucy had brought from our Diego in case he tried any funny shit. The two collide, and though Diego technically won the Steel Ball Run race, he is obliterated, leaving a vacant spot. Steven Steele then rescues Johnny, allowing him to reverse the infinite rotation, though it does disqualify him from the race. Poco Loco does actually win as a result of Diego's disappearance though, and Steven arrives at the vault and sees that the corpse has been sealed away, which is for the better, as it's really nobody's to own. Though Valentine is gone, his approval skyrockets as a result of the race. Making good on his friend's wishes, Johnny boards a boat to deliver Gyro and his horse's body to the Zappellis. Johnny then notices a fellow contestant, Norisuke Higashikata, and his daughter, Rina, which surely won't ever come up again. And, after bidding them a farewell, he reminisces on his journey with Gyro and prays for safe passage across the ocean, telling Gyro, let's go home. In the following years, the boys that Gyro wanted to save was set free, though he would later pass of a cold. And with that, we have the ending of my favorite piece of fiction ever, Not Even Glaze. So we fast forward a little over a century to our last completed part at the time of writing this. A young lady, one Yasuho Hirose, runs away from the creep Joshu Higashikata near a landmark called the Walleyes that are located on the coast of this universe's Morio. They popped up a little bit ago after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake happened. A real life event for those of you who don't remember it. While she's hiding, she discovers a man half buried in the ground with the famous Joestar birthmark on his shoulder. Strangely though, there's a bite mark surrounding it, which kinda just doesn't really come up again. She pulls him out of the ground while trying to ask more about him, before noticing that the man has not one, not two, but 4 balls. A detail that is surprisingly important. Joshu pulls up and starts shit, because of course he does, and the man, an apparent amnesiac, uses a soap bubble that emerges from his birthmark to pop Joshu's eyes, which, don't worry, or worry, I don't like Joshu, isn't permanent. The man then faints before reawakening in the hospital, with Yasuho bringing him there. Yasuho offers to help the man find his identity, and after escaping from the hospital, they do so by investigating the hat shop that his uniform's hat's from, to which the shopkeep tells him that his name is Yoshikage Kira. Yasuho doesn't think the name fits him though, and instead dubs him Josuke after a dog she had. This Josuke's name is referred to officially in media as Josuke 8, or Part 8 Josuke, but the community around the franchise calls him Gappy on account of the prevalent tooth gap that he has, so I'll probably flip-flop between Josuke and Gappy depending on the situation. They go to visit his apartment, and among many little Easter eggs of the previous Yoshikage Kira, they discover a woman in his bathtub and a photo album of some freaky shit. Like some freaky shit. And since this would be Gappy's photo album, Yasuho leaves, understandably disgusted at the sight. As he investigates more, he slowly injures himself on traps, with each wound on his limbs allowing an attacker to take control of said limbs, as is described by the lady in the bathtub. Josuke uses his stand, soft and wet, to plunder the friction from the floor, allowing his swift victory after a timely return from Yasuho, who realized something was suspicious about the situation. The attacker was Ojiro Sasame, who was after the real Yoshikage Kira, attempting to trap him and take revenge on him with his stand Fun. Kira knocks him out and discovers a picture of Yoshikage Kira near the Walleyes, and upon investigating, they find his corpse buried and, weirdly enough, missing the organs that Josuke had doubled up on, if you catch my drift. Trying to give Josuke a place to go, Yasuho introduces him to the Higashikatas, a wealthy family of fruit importers, whose business was established by Norisuke Higashikata I, that one contestant in the Steel Ball Run race over a century prior. Josuke gets the family's last name and receives a warm welcome, though unbeknownst to him, Yasuho is quickly shooed off by the family, warned to never come near him again. The youngest sister of the family, Daya, immediately begins to be a fucking weirdo with Gappy, and manipulates him into obeying her whims by stealing what little memories he has with the use of her stand California King Bed. The only way he can get these memories back is by stepping on her shadow, which he almost accomplishes by faking interest in her, but he actually accomplishes it by stealing the noise from a refrigerator to do so. He gets his memory back and earns her trust as an ally, before going to investigate a symbol in Norisuke IV's library that he saw on Kira's wrist. He discovers in an archive of the Steel Ball Run that the first Norisuke's daughter, Rita, ended up marrying one Johnny Joestar, who is a direct ancestor of Yoshikage Kira. Here's the family tree for anybody who's curious. Josuke seeks out Kira's living relatives, of which there is only one, Holly Joestar Kira. He enlists Yasuho, who agrees to help, having previously discovered that Josuke and Kira are an identical match in DNA. They discover that Holly was a doctor at a local hospital, though she is now a patient of said hospital, TG University. On the way to meet though, Josuke is attacked by the stand Born This Way, an automatic tracking stand that pursues its target only after they have opened something. Side note, Part 8 has this reputation for having these ridiculously convoluted stand conditions, and this is primarily because of the first 3 encounters, though some pop up later that are similar. But just know that if you read Jojolion and you find yourself being confused by some of the stand activations, you are not alone. Separately, but also still during this encounter, Yasuho awakens her own stand, Paisley Park, which looks fucking awesome by the way, but is essentially a support stand that, one way or another, guides our main crew to their goals, which it accomplishes in this battle by leading Josuke to his assailant, one Kei Nijimura. Nijimura also has a star birthmark, revealing that she is Kira's little sister, and thus Holly's daughter, who's going undercover to try and protect her mother from some larger threat, seemingly involving the Higashikatas somehow. She informs Josuke that through a phenomenon with the Walleyes that mixes 2 things together, Josuke is a mix of 2 men, Yoshikage Kira and some other mysterious third party. Kira's stand was not soft and wet, but rather Killer Queen, so the current soft and wet is a mix of the two people's stands. This is also why Josuke has the extra organs that he does and Kira's corpse doesn't, and furthermore why his eye color is split in two, which looks fucking really cool. Elsewhere, Yasuho meets with Holly, who doesn't seem entirely there. She discovers that Holly is the victim of some bizarre disease, missing several of her organs and having chunks of her brain missing, though the doctors are inconclusive as to why. Returning back to their day-to-day lives for the meantime, Norisuke IV, who I'm simply just gonna call Norisuke for the rest of the video, tells Jojo to take Josuke to the local high school to enroll him there. On the way there though, they stumble upon Shakedown Road. The road itself has a stand, or rather the leaves there do. Les Feuilles, or autumn leaves as I will call it, as that's basically the English translation. The leaves here transport anything that steps on top of them incredibly fast, which the locals use to con people out of their money. Jojo awakens his own stand, Nut King Call, which allows him to unscrew things from each other, which, fun fact, was supposed to be Gappy's original ability before Araki changed it. They work their way out of a sticky situation and learn the tale of Johnny Joestar, or rather, the life he lived after SBR. After marrying Rina, Johnny would live a mostly happy life with his wife. That is until an illness strikes her. She becomes an amnesiac, with her skin slowly turning to stone. In despair and basically out of options to treat his wife's illness, Johnny steals the Saint's corpse from its vault in America before fleeing to Japan. In Morio, Johnny prays to the Saint's corpse for his wife's illness to be removed, but as we learned from Love Train, there must be some equivalent exchange. Whatever good is given to the user of the corpse must be balanced by some other misfortune elsewhere. And to Johnny's horror, the disease was transferred onto his son, George Joestar III. Out of options, Johnny uses Tusk Act 4 to force the disease out of his son and onto himself, with the nail bullet seemingly coincidentally, but perhaps as a result of a more omnipotent power, activating the first instance of Autumn Leaves, which crushes Johnny's head under the weight of a boulder, killing him. Rest in peace, my absolute goat will be missed. With Josuke realizing that Rina was a Higashikata and that her illness bears a striking resemblance to the one that Holly has today, perhaps his arrival/birth was not a coincidence. It's also worth noting that this story follows two separate branches that the Higashikatas took. The Kiras, which is Johnny Joestar and his descendants, and the modern day Higashikatas, which were the offspring of a separate child that the original Norisuke had. Yasuho ends up on the Higashikata estate under the Meditation Pine, the tree that Johnny Joestar had previously hid the corpse under before being kidnapped by the youngest of the Higashikatas, Tsurugi. Tsurugi reveals that he is cross-dressing to try and throw off the existence of a curse that affects the firstborns of the Higashikata family. That is a fucking hard last name to say a lot. This curse, though, turns the firstborn of each generation to turn to stone slowly. Tsurugi afflicts Yasuho with his stand, Paper Moon King, which makes people appear indistinguishable, before he dismisses it after a misadventure. Tsurugi apologizes, letting Yasuho in on more about the curse, with Yasuho putting together that this sounds similar to Holly's illness as well, and that Kira had previously tried to save her from said illness before his passing. After Tsurugi leaves, Yasuho is attacked by a man, Yotsuyu Yagiyama. At the same time, Josuke learns from Norisuke that, though he may have come off as hostile, he was merely intending to learn of a cure for their family's illness from Josuke's memories, as Kira had supposedly learned of one for Holly's affliction shortly before his death. Norisuke and Josuke are attacked by Yagiyama, and end up tracking him to the location of Yasuho using Norisuke's stand, King Nothing. The assailant is bizarre though, having the ability to turn himself into a rock, all while attacking with his stand, I am a rock. Note that I am a rock has no correlation to his ability to turn into a rock, this is just a thing he can do. Though he attempts to attack the pair once more, Josuke drags him into the ocean beneath a net. Yagiyama, however, refuses to exchange answers for his life, simply crumpling away to stone in the ocean. Josuke spots a fruit that sinks into the ocean, unable to retrieve it. The assailant previously offered Tsurugi a cure for the curse in exchange for Josuke, which started this whole fight off, leading to the conclusion that the fruit had something to do with the cure. The person's remains only serve to confuse the cast more though, as they are merely a bunch of debris now. They investigate and discover that Yagiyama was not the man's real identity, and in reality, he has no identity. Along the shore, they find a dog that has the ability to transform into a rock alongside that piece of fruit. Being fruit importers, Norisuke attempts to discover the fruit's identity, but their investigations are interrupted by the arrival of Jobin Higashikata, Norisuke's eldest and the father of Tsurugi. Now, you may be wondering, how does the family deal with the curse if they cannot cure it? Well, when it comes time, another family member will bear the burden of the curse through an exchange with the Walleyes or Meditation Pine. They will remove the curse from the firstborn and place it onto another, older family member. Though that's not really what happened for Jobin, but whatever. Jobin's return seems like big news, as he was away on a trip abroad. He gifts Josuke a stag beetle, cause he loves the things, and who can blame him? Fly aimlessly, my scarab. Josuke, though, picks up on the fact that King Nothing tracks the mysterious fruits sent on Jobin's person. So Josuke enlists Tsurugi to see if he can pry anything out of Jobin, to which he is informed that he must use Jobin's prized stag beetles as bait. Thus, Josuke persuades Jobin into a stag beetle fight. Though Josuke wins the first round by doping his beetle with pheromones, Jobin challenges him to another with his car as a wager, which is secretly what Josuke intended. Jobin cheats through a mix of wax in his stand, Speed King, which heats things up like crazy at the location that it touches. But Josuke cheats with some poison from a hornet and wins the keys. I can't do this fight justice by just a short summary, but believe me, it's unironically one of the top 5 stand battles in all of JoJo's. Josuke sends Yasuho the keys with a soap bubble, and Yasuho investigates the GPS in the car with Paisley Park, discovering alongside Tsurigi that Jobin has given a tree that bears the mysterious fruit to an unknown man. As Jobin begins to suspect that something is up with Josuke, he and the others flee the situation. Yasuho then learns the man's identity. One Aisho long-ass last name that I'm not gonna pronounce. She and Tsurigi watch him perform a deal where, after giving an amputee the fruit, he is able to regrow his leg, though it's at the cost of his eyesight. Aisho ends up finding the pair out, and a bit of backstory reveals that he belongs to a similar, coexisting species to ordinary humans, known as rock humans. We'll come back to this. The fight ends when Tsurigi tricks Aisho into getting run over by a bus. Yasuho and Josuke have a nice moment at the beach the next day, but it's interrupted by a woman who seemingly knows of Josuke's true identity. When he follows up with the girl, unintentionally kinda ditching Yasuho, he learns that her name is Karara Sakanami, who spills the information that the man she knows him as is Josefumi Kujo, who bears a striking resemblance to Part 4's Josuke. By the way, there's a couple of artworks where Josefumi is drawn with the birthmark, and as such, sense has been removed from all other prints of the manga. I remember thinking that Josefumi's lineage would be a big part of the story later on, but it kinda never came up, so I just had to look it up and find out that it was actually a mistake, so whatever. Anyways, as evidenced by the photograph, Josefumi knew Yoshikage Kira, and it seems that we are on the verge of discovering just exactly what's going on with Gappy's identity. You get a little more insight into the rock humans. They are a species that has evolved alongside humans, and as such tries to coexist with them, but most attempts to have interspecies relations end in the death of the normal human. Stand users are the normal though for the rock humans. And I'm just gonna state it now, literally every villain of the part save for Jobin is a rock human, and I don't really care to specify it every time, so there you go. We also get some backstory on the fruit. In 1938, the mysterious fruit, dubbed the Lokakaka, which quite frankly, I'm gonna call it a Roka because I was in Discord calls with people who played Prime YBA. Also, it's just way simpler. The Roka was discovered in New Guinea and was used by the locals to cure diseases and ailments in exchange for turning a random part of their body into stone. But after World War II, all reports of the fruit seemingly just vanished. Back with the family though, family member Hato brings in her chopped boyfriend Tamaki Damo. Unbeknownst to the family though, Damo is a rock human. He's the only one I'm going to specify that for, who incapacitates nearly the whole family with his stand vitamin C. Damo interrogates Norisuke as something had been going on with the organization of the rock humans, before we finally get to see what happened in Josuke's past prior to his waking up. 2 years ago, Kira discovers the existence of rock humans when Aisho appears as a stowaway on the ship he works at. Kira investigates the crate that Aisho came from and discovers the Roka, before meeting with Josefume, whose life he had previously saved as a kid. Josefume and Kira work together to steal a plant by taking some of the branches off of a Roka tree, before grafting them onto a new tree with Josefume's soft and wet, so that the fruit would prosper. But then they are found out by the rock humans and held captive. The pair are interrogated, and Kira almost dies, but sets off Killer Queen last second to allow Josefume to escape. On the shore, Josefume feeds Kira a new Roka fruit, and takes one himself. He attempts to save Kira's life through equivalent exchange, but the result is the creation of our Josuke, leaving Josefume's body with doubles of certain features, and Kira's body essentially a donor, absence of them. Damo exposits this to the group, before being defeated by Hato's Walking Heart alongside Josuke, which I gotta say, all of the Higashikatas spared Josuke have the word king in their name as a part of a naming convention, but Hato and like 2 others circumvent this through words that merely contain king. Small thing, kinda pisses me off. Whatever. Also, there's no real healing stand in this part, so Josuke just walks off his liver being cut out.
Alright.
Anyways though, having found out his origin, Josuke bears a new resolve in this world, accepting his identity as a mix of the two who sacrificed their lives to save him. Elsewhere, Norisuke's wife, Kato, finishes a prison sentence and plots with Jobin to backstab Norisuke in some way. Her prison sentence was a result of her taking the blame for Jobin having murdered another kid, which is how he got rid of his rock illness, but yeah. Joshu goes through some shenanigans with the money stand Milagro Man in a flashback, and in the present day, after affirming his own identity, Josuke goes to meet with Holly himself for the first time. However, Holly is not doing that well, having taken a nosedive compared to last time, as Josuke is baffled that she's being neglected by the hospital staff for some reason. so he offers to take care of Holly financially and find the cure for her affliction. Kato returns home to mixed reactions from the family, cause, you know. Josuke catches Norisuke up on the lore, and it's rather nice to see a good father figure in the Joestar bloodline with so many misses. Norisuke instructs him to seek out a plant appraiser that he knows in order to find a branch of the new Roca that was planted in the family's orchard. Kato overhears this and snitches to Jobin, who hires a rock human to attack Josuke. The rock, Dolomite, ends up controlling Josuke with his stand Blue Hawaii, but gets neutralized by Yasuho before name-dropping the mysterious organization that controls the narrative, the Roca Organization, and also the fact that Jobin is involved with it. Yasuho and Josuke meet with Rai Mamizuku, the plant appraiser, who tells them that they are up against a brand new threat, so they go to his home on top of a ski lift. He shows off his stand, which I won't name drop cause YouTube, and it's basically a knockoff Stone Free, though their use case is different. While chit-chatting, they're attacked by Urban Gorilla, and another brand new type of foe, a rock insect. All of the rock insects have different names, but they essentially serve the same function as stands in battle. This rock insect is a mode of transport for Urban Gorilla, and it's pretty cool actually. They almost kill the trio, but the trio triumphs by causing a gas leak that kills the rock beings. Jobin then meets with poor Tom, who instructs him to plant his stand, Ozone Baby, in the grounds of the Higashikata property, also wanting to find the branch for the organization. Yasuho remembers an incident in which a hair clip that she bought turned out to be a rock insect that coincidentally was killed by Yoshikage Kuro when she was a kid. In the early morning at the Higashikata household, the family is attacked by Ozone Baby, a long-range pressure manipulating stand that is honestly fucking ridiculously broken. It has a massive range, a massive damage output, and can only be stopped by digging up the stand or getting poor Tom to release it himself. But how the hell would a normal person deal with that? All the while the user can just be wherever they want away from it. Jobin and Tsurugi set the nearby orchard on fire, causing poor Tom to jump into action, who ends up clashing with Josuke and Mamizuku, who are protected by Soft and Wet's bubbles after they locate the branch. Josuke forces Tom into releasing Ozone Baby, who is almost saved by his allies from the Roca organization at the nearby hospital, TG University. However, when Tom pursues the ambulance driver, he is killed seemingly coincidentally by something passing through his head. His allies, though, retrieve what they think is the branch and flee before they can be caught. But unbeknownst to everybody involved, Tsurugi's Paper Moon King allows Jobin to get away with the real branch for himself. The ambulance driver seems to be aware of this fact though, and Jobin grafts the branch onto a cactus to wait for the fruit to grow. It's yet another moment where our protagonist experiences a sheer and utter loss, though I would say not on quite the scale as Johnny's loss, but whatever. However, the real branch is closer than Josuke is aware of. The Higashikatas gather, and Josuke establishes a 10-day timer to find the Roca. And a clue from Jobin about the hospital spurs the group into investigating. Yasuho investigates Mitsuba, Jobin's wife, who she witnesses receive a Roca treatment under the guise of a beauty treatment. The doctor, Dr. Wu, attacks Yasuho, but Mitsuba intervenes with her stand, awaking 3 leaves, and realizes that her baby was almost the victim of an equivalent exchange. So the two of them go to use another Roca to save it. On the way though, they run into Toru, no last name given, Yasuho's freaky-ass ex-boyfriend, who Araki practically begs you to ignore that he's probably a stand user. Yasuho tells Toru to inform Josuke of her location, which he does while being a weirdo. What a friendly young man introduced near the end of the part in a weird outfit. In a lab full of Rocas, Mitsuba eats one to save her baby before being attacked by Dr. Wu once more. But it's okay because Josuke pulls up and fodderizes him. They realize that the branch they're looking for isn't there, leading them to further realize that it was likely switched out, with Jobin likely being the culprit. Mitsuba's nose turns to stone, showing that the equivalent exchange worked, and that her child was saved. After a bit of further investigation, the only rock human that seems to be left alive is the hospital's head doctor, Satoru Akefu, a rather spry-looking old man who Toru shows them on his phone. That happens later, but I low-key don't have time to bring it up later, so here it is. However, every time they try to pursue the head doctor, he manages to inexplicably escape, with various calamities seeming to get in the way. And somehow, Toru always happens to be lurking around. Nonetheless though, pursuing the man goes awry in various ways. Injuries that should be small seem to become drastically larger, and Josuke ends up being framed for murder when a man in the parking lot of the building's neck snaps while he's trying to pursue the doctor. Simultaneously though, Akefu seems to be lurking near Mitsuba, who's back at the Higashikata household. The main forces split up though, with Josuke and Mamizuku investigating the doctor, and Yasuho investigating the Higashikata household. Tsurugi's rock disease suddenly becomes drastically worse, at possibly the worst moment, leaving Jobin eagerly awaiting for the fruit to be born. Josuke and Mamizuku try to pursue the doctor through a lecture that he's supposed to give. But that's when the duo is finally clued in that all of the misfortune and weird coincidence they've experienced while pursuing the Doctor are the result of the Doctor's stand conditions. Pursuing the Doctor, or even thinking about pursuing the Doctor, will somehow, some way, cause some sort of misfortune for the pursuer. Josuke attempts to attack the stand when it appears to attack him, but in the process he gets gravely injured, reawakening in the hospital in what is an attempt to get closer to the Doctor. Josuke is almost killed once more by the Doctor's stand, but then he meets with Holly once more, who saves his life with a roca fruit. She tells him not to pursue the Doctor before fainting, with Josuke finally resolving to make the Doctor pursue him, realizing that the rock humans were experimenting with the rocas on Holly, which has caused her illness. Meanwhile, Akefu kills a journalist, baiting him into pursuing him before going to confront Josuke, as the journalist had evidence of human trials with the roca. Yasuho is confronted by Jobin, who attacks her, and an appearance from the Doctor causes a calamity that results in Yasuho losing an arm. However, this alerts the rest of the Higashikata family, revealing the brand new roca. Norisuke confronts Jobin, who uses Speed King to introduce a heat stroke in him. Further calamity from the Doctor causes Jobin's death, and exposes the roca further in the garage. Yasuho calls Toru for help, but oh my god, who would have guessed? Toru is an enemy? Yeah, he opts to do nothing for now, instead listening to the song The Wonder of You by Elvis Presley, which, hey, wouldn't you know it, happens to be the name of this part's final villain's stand, Wonder of You. There is no head doctor. Wonder of You has the ability to disguise itself as an old man, and has merely been used in place of an actual head doctor. Any intent to pursue Toru or Wonder of You will trigger the stand's calamity attacks. It's just kinda too bad that Wonder of You itself, and hell, even Satoru Akefu by extension, have way more aura than Toru ever will have. That one cover of him is really cool though. Wonder of You pulls up to the laboratory, and still with more aura than Toru, senses that Josuke has a trap laid out for him. So he sends a rock insect out to combat first, which, no joke, wields asbestos. Mamazuku, who pulled up beforehand, helps Josuke dispose of the insect, but when he confronts Wonder of You, it informs him that it's responsible for the calamity that caused Mamazuku's father's death, baiting him into attacking further. Though he gets close, the calamity here causes Soft and Wet's bubbles to unintentionally kill Mamazuku, but his death reveals a key factor in Soft and Wet's ability that even he himself was unaware of. Soft and Wet's bubbles harness the spin, as they are not actually bubbles, but rather lines that are spinning infinitely close to zero, and thus, therefore, technically do not exist in this world. We cut back to the Higashikata household, where Yasuho is reeling from Wonder of You's previous attack. Joshu performs an equivalent exchange with Yasuho, giving his arm for hers, though he's a dumbass so he regrets it immediately. Yasuho confronts Toru after a flashback that reveals that he's literally been lurking around her ever since she was a kid, the girl that he would get in a relationship with later. You can put two and two together, what a fucking weirdo. Though he warns against pursuing her, she calls Kei Nijimura and informs her of Josuke's situation, which triggers the calamity, causing a plane panel to fall out of the sky as an oncoming attack. Josuke tries to bait Wonder of You into pursuing him further, but accidentally triggers its ability once more. It's okay though, because Nijimura arrives to intervene, freezing Josuke's bubbles, which is the first attack on Wonder of You that actually works on it, revealing that Rai had a point about Soft and Wet's potential. Nijimura dies though as a result of the calamity, and after Josuke gives Yasuho the information she needs about Toru, Toru makes his stand flee, opting to confront Yasuho directly in person. Toru claims the roca for himself, and Josuke goes to fire on Wonder of You with his newfound knowledge of his stand, but misses because of a rock insect. He misses his second shot as he's actually not able to aim it, but Paisley Park ends up guiding it towards Toru's real body, which is a direct hit, allowing her to be spared from the plane part that was set to hit her. Toru then eats a roca to try and force an equivalent exchange with Yasuho to heal his wounds. But one more shot from Soft and Wet's new ability, Go Beyond, is enough to put Toru on his last legs. Suddenly, Kato pulls up and forces Toru to perform an equivalent exchange with Tsurigi, ridding him of his disease and ending the Higashikata curse, before Toru succumbs to his wounds, dying. However, this counted as an attack on Toru, and Kato dies shortly after. Though Toru is dead, Wonder of You tries to inhabit Norisuke's body, worsening his condition, as Calamity is not merely just a stand, but something that will always exist in the world, a law of the world even. But it's okay, because Josuke pulls up in time to kill the avatar of Calamity for good. We get one last insight into Lucy Steele of all people, who, in 1941, tries to investigate the rocas by herself in Japan. She's helped by a man named Fumi, and they go to the Higashikata orchard, where they are attacked by a rock insect, which kills their driver. Fumi saves himself and Lucy from the insect though with his stand, presumably this part's Hermit Purple, revealing himself to be none other than Joseph Joestar, who would become Holly Joestar Kira's father. Coincidentally, and basically separately by the way, but a pair of sandals worn by Fumi ends up getting discovered and goes on to inspire Joseph Fumi's name later. Back in the now present day though, Josuke and Yasuho run into Joseph Fumi's mother, who remembers her son, but Josuke feels that he isn't Joseph Fumi. nor is he Kira, but rather a separate person formed by his experiences as Josuke, so he decides not to approach her. At the family's fruit parlor, they all settle on a cake to use the next day when Norisuke gets out of the hospital having recovered, leaving the decision to Josuke, who has found his true family. The end. Except not really, because part 9 is still ongoing, as it comes out weekly, so I would be outdated really fast. So here's a very brief plot synopsis. You can skip to this timestamp if you don't want any spoilers, I understand that. Jojo and Dragona Joestar, who have really cool looking stands by the way, I fucking love how November Rain looks. Massive stand, awesome. Are a pair of siblings under a separate branch of the Joestar bloodline, as Joseph had 2 kids in this universe, but not in a cheating way. These 2 kids seek to get enormously wealthy by using a lava rock to steal assets from a rich man named Howler. They pick up some friends along the way as a part of their gang, and it's kinda unclear at this point whether Howler will be the main villain the whole way through, or if we're gonna have a Jobin situation, so I'm just not gonna make that call. Right now he is the main villain, but I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, that was the entire history of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Holy fuck. This was so much effort to make. This has been by far my longest script, clocking in at 90 pages. But that's sort of a blessing in disguise. I love doing these types of videos. They give me a chance to explain media that I really enjoy to an audience that might not have been interested in it otherwise. Mainly just my girlfriend, but it also gives me the chance to explain it to my friends who might not like it, which unfortunately is a decent chunk of my friend group. And now it has been shared with you, kind stranger. It also just gives me a chance to reread shit that I like and get it out of my system. So yeah, I really can't complain about that. Anyways though, thank you very much for watching. I understand that this was probably a very long watch. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe. And join our Discord server in the link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.